Yep, okay, Mark.
I'll say as well, I will be in receipt of Milgos pension at some stage.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. And of course, we're just taking declaration of interests. So I just wonder, given today's agenda, is there anything you'd like to express in particular?
Everything to do with football.
I kind of thought that would certainly be. So thank you for that, Morris. And yep, thanks, members. I think that's everything. So moving on to agenda item 2 then. Apologies. Clerk, are you aware of any apologies?
Full house with Melissa.
Oh yeah, Melissa, yeah. So full house, thank you. Agenda item 3, members, Chairperson's business. So yeah, I have to begin by noting the removal of trilingual logo from DFC letterheads on official correspondence. I think a retrograde step in terms of visibility, and given that the department has the responsibility for promotion and development of the Irish language strategy, I think that's a very wrong decision, I have to say. I also, members, just want to say for your information, we had asked for a departmental briefing on the Irish language strategy. The department has come back to the team to say that officials are not available to brief on the proposed date of 2nd of October and advised they will come back with another date. So I did raise concerns in relation to Irish language in the Chamber on Tuesday, and I feel this is more delay on the department on an important issue and one that's long running now. So Corlia, Nagil, Scully-Acta have asked to brief the committee, and it did make sense to ask the department to be here at that same session. However, given that they have indicated they're not available for that date, do committee want to proceed with Corlia and Nagil in the absence of confirmation of availability from the department?
Yes, please. Makes sense.
Yep. Thank you, members.
Just through the Chair, just on that issue as well, Chair, I was disappointed, and I thought it very, very petty. I know part of the reason or excuse given for the removal of the Irish language and from letterhead, paper and so on was that it was a cost-saving exercise. I'd like to know how much it saved.
Members agreed? We seek that information?
I also just ask, is there a policy right across the executive around this? Because it does seem to me that, you know, departments can pick and choose their letterheads, and I think that's one thing. But it would be preferable to have some form of consistency. This just goes to look like each silo working in, you know, in its in isolation. And I do think, and I would agree that particularly with the department that has the responsibility for languages, it's a really poor look. But if possible, Chair, I think it would be interesting just to know, is there any way of us getting information about a policy right across the executive in terms of the visibility of our minority and indigenous languages? And that would be useful.
Members content? We
letter to TEO.
Yeah, that would be useful. I think.
I agree.
Yeah, I concur with what other members have said, and maybe just a wee add on. Melissa, it's to establish like when this decision was made and any departmental financial advice that it was based on.
Kelly?
Chair, I have grave concerns over this, and the reason is because of the bill that we're currently working on. We will be bringing forward the sign language bill for the Minister, and to be honest, if it's going to be held in the same regard as Irish language, then I don't have a lot of faith that the deaf community will see the light of day with sign language if there's no strategy or action coming forwards. And just on that point, because the Irish Language Act didn't contain deadlines, I think it is something that we may have to consider for the sign language bill. Because, as I have found with other legislation, that unless you put timescales, then departments don't tend to deliver.
Thank you, Kelly. Yep. Okay, I think that's Clark. Have you got the actions? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, members. Also, I would just like to note that it has, I think, become clear that Brian is going to be leaving the committee in very short time. And I just want to thank Brian for his work on the committee. It's been a busy period of time, and this is a committee that has a lot of varying issues, and you've brought a certain perspective to all of that work and a diligence that I really appreciate as chair, and I want to wish you well on behalf of the committee for your next role, or whatever that next role, which I'm sure you'll bring the same focus and attention to. But thank you for your time in this committee.
Well, look, thank you, Chair, for that. I've enjoyed my time on the committee. It's has a remit that ties in with a lot of my previous work and interests. So I wish reshuffles happen. So I'm moving to broaden experience elsewhere, and I wish the committee well, particularly with the sign language bill, the important work that is happening there. So sorry to be moving on this time, but as I say, there's fresh learning for me on other committees, and I wish you all well. I've enjoyed serving with you, despite the odd row and disagreement, but that's the nature of politics. We expect that, and we all defend our positions. Okay, thank you now.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, members, thank you for that. And I'm moving on then to item 4, which is our draft minutes, which are contained there. This is the meeting of the 11th of September, and the draft minutes are contained at page 7. Are members content to agree the minutes of 11th of September as drafted? Content. Thank you, members. Matters arising then, members. You've been provided with a summary table of matters arising at page 25. So can I please ask if members have any comments in relation to items 5.2 to 5.4?
Yeah.
Deputy Chair, yeah.
Just on 5.3, there was a response to the air call for evidence from our committee. I just wonder, could we maybe have a bit more time to look at that there and defer it maybe before we make a full decision on it, because there's quite a lot of detail on it, and the likes of that. One of the recommendations is about creating ad hoc committees. It'd be probably good to see exactly how they would work, what they would look like moving forward. So, is it possible to defer that decision?
There is a deadline on Friday, so I can communicate to the clerk.
Or for all committees, I mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
The ARC one?
Yes,
Yeah.
ARC, yeah.
Go ahead,
For
Kelly.
one
Come
more
in on
week
that,
for the committee, I can ask.
There is a significant difficulty coming forward for all committees to do with what AERC are considering. I have to say I'm becoming more and more frustrated as a committee member trying to carry out scrutiny. The fact that there are cross-cutting items, and we have quite a lot of them, to be honest, when you think about anti-poverty and you think about housing and so on. This was brought up actually in the last mandate. So there's an issue whereby committees are restricted to the department that they're connected to, and not to any other department, but the outcomes are across all departments. So it is something I've had a concern with. It would be useful if we could ask AERC when they have collated all of their evidence, if we can have a copy of that too.
Yeah, thank you. You got that, Claire? I think for me, yeah, it's clear that we absolutely want to see those key strategies being driven forward in a way which is effective and makes a difference. I suppose I would, like the Deputy Chair, would be keen to know some more of the detail in terms of how an ad hoc committee might operate, or how it would be better, and how it would ensure that change is a positive one. But I think that's something that will all be. More information will come in due course, I would hope.
To be honest, Chair, the ad hoc committee isn't the answer, because it just means more committee meetings instead of proper scrutiny. What I'd be interested in is finding out from AERC what they're doing with the RHI recommendations with regards to scrutiny to enable us to do our work, because the outcomes that are linked to communities are not all within communities' remit, but nobody's holding the other departments to account on that matter.
No, I think that's particularly key in a number of strategies. So it is one. So our clerk, have you got the information to
I can certainly ask for the extension. There is a deadline on Friday, and if members have any other comments they want fed into the draft response, please send them through. Yeah.
Okay. Members content with that approach? So we're still on 5.2 to 5.4. Is there anything else that members wish to flag up or draw out? 5.4 then is the draft response in relation to anti-poverty strategy, which can be found in the table pack at pages 6 to 13. So there's a number of points made there in relation to that. I think there's a couple of things that I would sort of like to see maybe reflected as well around the legislative framework and legally binding targets. Is something that that the lack of new actions, I think, is touched upon in the draft. The independent monitoring so the current governance is a bit unclear. I think it's key that is independently monitored to ensure delivery. And the lack of a life cycle approach, I think, within the strategy is very key, and one that maybe we should flag up. Are there any other areas that members are? Go ahead, Sian.
I think for me, most of the stuff that I had wanted to see is here. I would agree with the Chair about the life cycle approach and about legally binding elements of this, and I think we've seen that in Scotland, where I know the Minister has said in the Chamber, well, they didn't meet their legally binding targets, but they went some way to actually getting there, and I think that's the point that we need to focus on, is actually there was progress. And having those legally binding targets, I think, is a really good way to focus. But for me, the main things that we had drawn out from conversations were around that. First of all, the governance element of it, the targets for me is the big thing. We need to take the learning from the evidence that we have at hand. Most recently, obviously, the PAC report and the NIAO report. So for me, that was the key thing, is that targets. And then the other, I suppose that the thing that's come back quite a bit is just that cross-departmental working. And it feeds in exactly to what we were saying before in the item around AERC, is we can't compel other departments to come to this committee. We can't compel officials to come to this committee. And that to me is a massive gaping hole, because people do not exist in poverty in a silo. It feeds into health, it feeds into education, justice, economy, right across the board. And if we are not able to have any scrutiny about what those departments are putting into their budgets, their action plans, their departmental plans, then how do we know that this is actually a genuine cross-departmental, cross-cutting approach to trying to eradicate poverty in our society? So that to me is just that, it's that governance piece and that cross-departmental piece that I think is just really worrying. But I'm really glad to see, particularly around those targets and baselines being put in there in terms of our response.
I think it's also given the strength and the breadth of the concern we had around the input from the co-design partners. I think it's important to note that's in. Okay, members, anything else on 5.2 to 5.4?
Just a big thank you, sorry, to the team for putting that together at such short notice as well. Thank you.
Yep, indeed. Okay, do we have for the correspondence clerk and table papers or matters arising? No, that's us. Okay.
Shortest matters arising.
Okay, that's great. So, and you're content that we have agreement on all of that? Yeah. Clear direction, yeah. Thank you. Agenda item 6 then, members, is correspondence. So the correspondence memo is at page 39. So I will draw out the items by number within in a single group, and ask if you want to highlight, draw out or seek for the briefings in relation to any specific item of correspondence within those groups. So can I first of all ask if members have any comments on items 6.2 to 6.7, and before I go to members, I just want to flag up item 6.4 there, a request to brief the committee on the Mackey's housing site. So can I ask members if we're content with the proposal to invite them in, and maybe to ask the clerk to check if there's any other schemes or projects in that, given the scale of that site, that if there's anything else relevant that we consider including that maybe in a session. Brian?
Yeah, I can't think of too many other cases in which people come into committee, to talk about housing projects, and there have been other proposals which don't come to committee. Regarding this here particular application, to make it clear, it is not supported. It's an interface site and it's not supported within the unionist community. This is a site that belongs to Invest NI. I've repeatedly engaged with Invest NI to bring employment investment to that site, and they say they're continuing to market it, and that is the purpose for which the site is retained. So to call it a Mackey's housing site, it's not a housing site. It's an industrial development site, and it should be a site of employment. So, I mean, this group PPR have opposed other developments in that area when the Fourth Meadow Community Greenway was created, and a new safe area set down pickup for Springfield Primary School, which has greatly improved parent and pupil safety. So the site is not designated for housing, and the owners of the site do not wish to see housing on the site. They want to see employment there. So this is a lobbying exercise which is not supported from within the unionist community, who want to see employment opportunities there. So I would be opposing bringing this group in. They're flying a kite, and anyone can apply for planning application on a site. It doesn't mean, even if you don't own the site, so it doesn't mean it's going to happen. And as I say, I'd be opposed to giving any credence to this proposal.
Okay, thanks for that, Brian. That's noted. I suppose, given the complexity of the site, that's why I think it would be useful to have a broader look. What are other members? Any other thoughts in relation to that, members? Kelly?
We have over 60,000 people in Northern Ireland without a home at the moment in the waiting lists. The more housing that we can have built, the better. Talking about the economy is well and good, but if people don't have a home, they can't actually go to work. So I think it would be good to hear what they have to say, and to be honest, to say clearly out of this committee, the land transfer stuff needs to happen, because Belfast is one of the pinch points of where the housing waiting lists are the highest.
Yeah. Andy?
Sure. An approach we've taken, not specifically in relation to housing, and I understand the challenges and difficulties we have, is do we perhaps ask for a more detailed written briefing and move forward from there?
Yeah, I think that'll be. Yeah, I think information is key on this one, so I'd be content with that proposal. What do a member think? And we'll keep it live and under consideration.
Won't preclude a future.
No, that will form part of it. But I think that's a sensible enough.
It's an approach we've taken for others, obviously, given as it's often referred to our challenge and work plan moving forward. We've taken that similar approach for others.
I think that's valid. I think I note what Brian's saying. I do think the need for housing that Kelly's saying is important. So let's take a more considered approach to it, and let's see where we go from there and bring it back to committee.
Yeah,
Members
brilliant.
content with that. Okay, Clerk, you happy enough with the detail? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, members, then the other item I want to draw out in this block, so we're still on 6.2 to 6.7. 6.7, there's a request from the department to brief on an update on building safety policy development. Are members content that briefing is scheduled for a future meeting on that one?
Yes, please.
Yep, thank you. So, members' comments, Melissa, go ahead.
Chair, just 6.6, yeah. Yep. Oh, sorry. The Northern Ireland Community Infrastructure Fund. And the launching of that is in Pomeroy. And is that information going out to all groups everywhere? Because it's not the most central of locations, for this to be communicated to those groups who may be interested in applying to that fund.
Well, I'm not sure, but I have to say I was pleased to see Pomeroy, to be quite honest. And I think some of the less central locations are no less important and should be used. And I was actually pleased that the department were coming out to Pomeroy. I'm looking forward to being at it, to be quite honest. So
I have no difficulty
the communication,
with
yes,
itself,
yeah,
but I do think that it should be spread more widely in terms of, we'll say, of information in particular. Anyway, that would be at that launch.
So just let me check because I don't think it is 6.6. Can I check
6.5.
6.5 there.
It was in for members to note. Does the committee want a question to go back asking about the extent of the geographic communication for the event?
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's a fair point, Melissa. You're dead right. That is also an important and a key thing that it goes out to all groups. So thanks, Melissa. Was there anybody else indicated in that block there, or are we content to move on then to items 6.8 to 6.13? Are there anything within that members wish to flag or note or discuss?
6.8, Chair.
Yep, go ahead, Melissa.
The clippings, and I'm sure that if people have read them, it will cause them concern as well too, to see that bands are actually receiving public funding that are deliberately breaking the rules. And if anything, if the press releases are correct, it was very insipid in terms of the response even by the Arts Council when they were dealing with some of those offending bands that were being offensive in their participation in types of parades that would have been not, I'm sure, part of the criteria when it came to the Arts Council sort of giving funds in the first instance. So I think that the Arts Council, if anything, really have a case to answer here, and that we as a committee maybe should invite them to attend this committee and to explain to us just how it is that the rationale they use when allocating funds, and that when people are in breach of conditions, what it is that they do about that as well.
Okay, members content with that? Brian?
Yeah, but I have to comment on the article that I thought it was very unfair on the bans. These are, they've cited parades which were approved by the Parades Commission, so that they are legal parades, and the police have flagged up no difficulties with them. So I do feel this is politically motivated from a particular newspaper, and so I have no doubt that criteria are being followed. As I say, I just think this is politically motivated. The attempt to prevent bands getting funding when they're taking part in lawful events, and there are many commemorations across Northern Ireland, and if people want memorials to come under scrutiny, then let that happen across the board.
Thank you, Brian. Melissa, looking back in.
Just on that point, the very fact that the Parades Commission has actually, ruled on a particular parade as not being contentious, all it is effectively saying is that it's in a locality where the people of that locality won't be offended maybe by the parade. It doesn't imply any degree of legality in terms of what it is that they present there for. And as someone who does be involved quite often with the Parades Commission, I totally understand their role and remit in relation to band parades and the likes of it. But in this case, that when one refers to that particular occasion, it was in honour of a sectarian killer. It was as simple as that. And that people would find that in many respects, should it be in any other locality, as totally and absolutely offensive. In other words, if this parade was to take place outside of its own locality, it would have then been very, very contentious and regarded as contentious.
Chair, can I come back briefly?
Briefly, please.
Yeah, I do not take part in events that honour sectarian killers, and I don't know if all members of this committee can say that.
Okay, so the key issue at issue here is whether the committee agree that we're going to ask the Arts Council to come in on this issue, because there have been a number of I suppose, ongoing issues with that in the media. So are members content that we get the Arts Council in?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Just could we also have a remit from the Minister about illegal on memorials erected without planning permission? Maybe it would be good to have that information as well. Just so that we can have a balanced discussion.
So I have no issue. I'm going to check with Clerk. Is that an issue for this committee? Is memorials
on housing executive land and so on, or DFC owned land.
I've no issue, Morris, with doing that. I just want to make sure that we're not stepping into an area that's outside of specifically of our remit. Go ahead.
I would welcome that, because the amount of memorials I have that have been set up that have really, really upset people. But the only thing is, I worry that if it's in relation to planning permission, that's finance and infrastructure. It's nothing to do with this committee. But it would be interesting to find out, with that community relations hat on, how much of the community actually gives permission for those things to be erected. I have several, and they are vindictive, and to be honest, they have caused an awful lot of community incohesion because of where they've been put up and the threats that have been made to any members of the community that are opposed to them.
Final, very, very briefly, I'm thinking about illegal memorials erected in council land and housing executive land, which is the remit of this committee.
Okay, thanks for that clarification, Morris. Go ahead, Sian.
Yeah, no, just it's I suppose before we get the Arts Council in, it might be useful to ask the department for their response to this article, because they say just that last line that they were, after the refusal of the Arts Council to comment, we've asked the Department for Communities to provide us with a response. It might be useful just to ask the department for that before we get the Arts Council in, and I think then we can look at it through the frame of reference of that letter of expectation that was sent out by the Minister whether that will clarify then some of the issues potentially that are coming up here.
Yeah. So just to clarify, that's to get the Arts Council in and get the letter in, and have the Arts Council have the letter in before the Arts Council
if possible,
comes. So do both.
I think it would be useful for us to hear from the department and just in terms of their response to these issues coming up, and then maybe bring the Arts Council in and see whether anything has changed in terms of their criteria or how they process that.
Yeah. Can I check if you're satisfied with
So
it?
the letter regarding the memorials is to the DFC Minister, asking for the policy on the establishment of memorials on housing executive or council lands.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
solely
Just
to the
to build on
DFC
that.
Minister.
The role of council within that as well, because obviously council does sit within our remit, and it comes back to the point earlier on around AERC, that cross-cutting nature where it cuts across multiple different departments, but the council aspect of that does cut across ours, and maybe what engagement the ministers having with council around taking steps on these.
Yeah.
Okay.
Clerk, you're
well,
content to add, and members content to add that element. Okay, so are we clear enough now then? Yeah. Okay, thank you, members. Can I check, is there anything else in 6.8 to 6.13 that members wish to highlight? Just on the 6.12 there, visitor services issues, I think we should write to the department and ask them for a response to that, just given that that's a core function of the department, the museums. So if we could ask for comment on that, and then we can see what go ahead, Kelly.
Just 6.13. I'm a wee bit concerned about the business plan that has come forward. In that, when we look at the outcomes that the department will be achieving, and it was brought up in the debate this week about the work that's being done within communities. When we look at the diversity piece, it talks about fuel poverty, certainly talks about the disability strategy and sign language, but we're not seeing anything in there to deal with the racism or the sectarianism that has built up within communities. That would be something I'd be expecting to see a proactive measurement in there for the department to be delivering on it, particularly since the tensions have been so vile this last month. Could we go back to the department and just ask them to clarify what they are actually doing proactively to further community relations work within communities?
Yeah. Members?
Committee agrees, yeah.
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 Is there anything else there, members? Or I'm just, while I'm looking here, I thought there was something else I had.
I'm still not, Chair, convinced. I know we heard it in verbally, but I think we need it in writing from the department about those social strategies that are not being delivered this year, or 25-26. The multi-year budget is coming forward, and while we've been told that there may be money set aside for them, I believe that that's not going to happen. The budget's only going to get tighter and worse, and why would they be holding back money for social strategies that they haven't written? I'm very concerned that they're closing the door for some of those social strategies for the years to come.
So committee agreed a letter last week in that regard. So what planning is being undertaken at present in relation to the social strategies and a timeline for them? So that is just being sent currently.
But it's importantly to get clarification
On the
about
budget.
the budget that's going to be set aside for them.
It is in there as well,
Yeah,
the budget
okay.
question, yeah.
Oh, that's great, thank you.
I'm sure.
Okay, members content? Okay, thank you, members. So moving on then to agenda item 7, members, the sign language bill, overview of evidence received to date. So members, you've been provided with a memo in relation to an overview of the evidence at page 325. The memo provides members with an update on the work progressed to compile evidence received and information on the proposed next steps regarding the committee stage of the sign language bill. Starting at page 329, members have also been provided with 2 further documents, which are a clause-by-clause summary of the evidence received and a summary of the oral evidence received to date and any request for further clarification. So I will come to members to ask if you have any comments on the documents, or are you content to note the proposed next steps, which are page 327. But I do want to thank the staff of the committee here. It's a fantastic resource, I think. It really will shape and inform and assist us to apply the scrutiny, and really strong piece of work in keeping with this very strong work that's been done in putting the evidence sessions together and the communication needs of all of that and strategies to put in place. It's been a fantastic example of co-production and reaching out on inclusion, and I really want to, and there's a massive amount of work and going above and beyond the normal in that, and I do want to acknowledge the committee staff in that. Kelly.
Can I just ask, I see that our last sort of evidence sessions will complete in October, which is great. There have been really good sessions. Can I just check then, number 7, that's on page, 3 of that paper, it's 327, where it talks about then we move into the clauses on the 6th of November. Can I just double check? There are some amendments that the committee has already identified that need to be changed if the department won't do it. For instance, that one representative of the deaf community, or it should be changed. I've had a conversation with the Bills clerk with regards to it, because there's a number of issues that I have evidence and they're repeated in some of the stuff that we have seen. But I'm just wondering if any of us have amendments that we wish to bring forward. Is it the 6th of November is the best time to do that, or should we send it through before?
So anything received to date, we have been in ongoing communications with the team in the department. So we can invite the department back in at that point to have discussions about the committee's proposals for amendments. Okay. Need to have deliberations first of all to agree whether they're collectively agreed by the committee.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about getting, instead of coming to the committee and then sort of producing them, do you want us to sort of circulate?
By all means, if you want to send them through, we can give advance notification of them. Yeah.
I think the earlier the better is generally the rule of thumb in anything.
I've been chatting with Liz just to make sure I'm not coming up with wild and wonderful things, but
Heaven forfend that you would even dream of such a thing.
Oh, don't you worry, I haven't seen them yet.
Chair, can I echo what you said? That is an incredible piece of work, just even looking through that as a refresher of all the incredible conversations we've already had about this bill. So thank you so much to our clerk team and
the whole team down the back there.
The entire team. Thank you so much. It's an incredible resource for us to have. Thank you.
Particularly for new members.
Brian.
With your indulgence, Chair, I just want to echo again, I mean, looking through the level of detail in that paper, issues that we've all raised at committee and evidence brought to us, so it is very comprehensive, and I will liaise with Morris, just notes I've taken on my own copy of the bill, just to make sure any wee queries that I've noted along the way, to make sure that they're fed in as well.
Thank you, appreciate that, Brian. I know you'll probably continue to take an interest as it moves its way through the Assembly chamber and that, so thanks for that. Okay, members, thank you very much. So members, content to note the proposed next steps at page 327. Thank you. Thank you. So agenda item 8, members, SR 2025/142, the Social Fund Winter Fuel Payment Regulations, NA 2025, and those are contained there at page 684. So we considered the SL1 for this rule at our meeting last week, members, and we were content for the department to make the rule. A departmental reply to committee queries from that meeting is at page 682. So I have to say that in relation to that, I do have some comments, and then I'll come to members, but it was quite shocking when the figures come back at how many people were implicated here. I think it said 26,230, is that right? Winter fuel payments went to people living in the south previously, and that roughly the same number of people will be losing out. Now that's quite shocking, I have to say. It's very, very worrying on wider terms in terms of going forward. And I suspect there are movements of finance the other way, and I don't know how all of that's being managed or considered. However, the questions I have around that is why officials didn't know the scale of that when they briefed the committee last week, or what work has been done. That's a pretty obvious question, I would have thought, for our department here to be thinking about. Like I'm saying, you can see why DWP maybe necessarily don't get that nuance, but our department has a huge duty to step up for people here where these complications arise as a natural result of just the geography, particularly along that border campaign where people often live on one side, work on the other, come from one side of and live on the other, all of that, both directions. So why the officials didn't know that, I would like to know, is this a policy change in order to maintain parity with Britain? I would like to know, has the Minister for Communities raised this with his DWP counterparts and flagged the significance of this, the numbers we're hearing here and the impact financially of that? And should the committee potentially maybe write to DWP asking how they are taking border communities into account when they change this policy, or if they're changing future policies? Now, that's not to say we very clearly always want to ensure that there's parities maintained and the SL1 or the SR is required for that purpose, but I think these questions are questions that need to be asked seriously, and there needs to be an awareness raised that this has to be taken into account and considered in any of these types of changes. If members are agreed. Go ahead, Deputy.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Chair. Obviously this is going to have a massive impact, especially on border communities, as you say. And that is a massive number, like over 26,000 people. And surely this potentially would have consequences in other areas as well. So it's something I think the Minister should be aware of and should be cognizant of moving forward as well. So it would be very interesting to know if he had made any kind of, if he'd raised this as an issue with DWP, and certainly I think as a committee we should be writing to them to raise it with them to really explain just the massive impact it'll have, especially on border communities.
Yeah. And like we are going to be looking at, we know what, for example, an LTM on pensions, and again, these border issues are going to need to be considered very, very carefully, and they're going to be different to what the considerations that you might have across the water. So,
Can I?
Go Brian first, and then I'll come to you, Kelly.
Yep. I mean, in the paper, I'm trying to understand why that number, 26,000 payments, were made to people living in the Republic of Ireland. Is this people with 2 homes then? I don't understand the scale of that. I mean, so I have to question that myself, why that was the scale of payments made to people living in the Republic of Ireland. I don't see the explanation for it. Is it people who had 2 homes?
Well, I think that all remains to be clarified, but certainly it's a massive number and needs to be taken seriously in whatever regard it is. And I suspect there will be reciprocal agreements in place from previously that means that it operates the other direction, and maybe still operate the other direction. And we need to be careful that people from here are not being disadvantaged by any of these changes that seem innocuous enough, and maybe are innocuous enough in many senses across the water, but have a different impact here. But yeah, that's a valid point as well. Yeah. Kelly?
Morris?
Sorry, it's Kelly. Kelly first.
I need to go and get a charger, and I apologise before I bring it down. It's out of the ordinary.
Iain Morris, do you want
No worries,
for the
Morris.
charge, if you want mine?
Thank you, Morris.
Do you want mine? I'm for the charge.
You can borrow mine.
Oh, it's for Mac.
Oh, right.
I can't use PCs.
Right.
Okay, Morris. Kelly, go ahead.
I'm interested that it's specifically identified the Republic of Ireland, and as Brian has said, you know, if someone has 2 homes, then they would have a home in Northern Ireland and the Republic. But I'm interested in those people when it talks about ordinarily resident in Northern Ireland. There are people who take their winter elsewhere. Are they included? They haven't provided any figures for that, so it's just if we could seek clarification for people who are not ordinarily resident in Northern Ireland. That's people who live elsewhere for part of the year. How is the department collating that information? Because they will have an address in Northern Ireland, but aren't normally resident here for the coldest part of the winter. Also, the opt-out. I'm pleased that there's an opt-out there, and I know people might be going, sure, who's going to opt out of getting money? The fact is that it's being predicted that from next year, people on state pension will have to pay tax. And this amount of money is, because they'll be over the threshold for the tax limits, this amount of money is income. So there may be more and more people going, this isn't worth it for the hassle of having to pay tax and stuff like that. It was very short notice this time about the opt-out and how people could go about that. I would like to ask the department going forward, are they planning, I know that they've said that they reached out to a number of different organisations. Having spoke to relatives actually who are in that situation, they never heard tell of the opt-out, and they're involved with some of those organisations. So it's just to say, will the department be doing something more proactive to let people know that this money is being treated as an income? It's not a disregard against their state pension, and will they have a longer lead-in campaign to let people know that there's a deadline for opting out?
Yeah. Members content with that? Yeah. And Clerk, you're content with the detail of that?
Can you remind me about the disregard part of that?
So the winter fuel payment isn't disregarded. That's why HMRC said that they could deduct it from people's tax bills. So it will be taken as part of income for a pensioner and state pension. I'll just add it to the tax bill.
Fair enough. And just can I check, Clerk, we can go ahead and agree the rule today, but these questions all still remain to be addressed by the department going forward, is that?
Well, many of the points are going forward points. However, the rules made, the opportunity to amend it at all was prior to today. So once the committee decision is taken today, that's it. Yeah.
Which is again all the more unfortunate that officials weren't aware of this till, or didn't brief us on this. That is, and the short time span between the two, it flags all of that up. Yeah. But anyway, let's take that all into account as we move forward. Any other comments, members? Then, so can I ask then if members have any objection to the rule? No. And then, given that there aren't, can I ask formally that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2025/142, the Social Fund Winter Fuel Payment Regulations, NI 2025, and has no objection to the rule, subject to the report from the Examiner of Statutory Rules. Members agreed? Great, thank you. Agenda item 9, members, Department for Infrastructure Retention and Disposal schedule. So this schedule was considered by the Committee for Infrastructure at its meeting last week, when members there indicated that they were content with the schedule. The end of the statutory period for the enclosed retention and disposal schedule has been calculated as 7th of October 2025. Are members content to approve the schedule? Yeah. Thank you. Agenda item 10 then, members, we're moving into our first substantive briefing today. Okay. Thank you. So we're moving then, members, to a departmental briefing on the NI Football Fund. Members have been provided with a copy of the Minister's statement at page 778, and a previous departmental update is contained at page 787. So we'd now like to welcome the following officials to the meeting. So we're being joined this morning by just take a second, members. Well, so I'll go through who we're getting, and probably they'll come in as we're talking. So we are being joined by Emer Morelli, who's Deputy Secretary with the Engaged Communities Group, Joanna Gray, who's Director of the Active Communities Division, Claire Tobin, who is Head of the NI Football Fund Performance Programme, and I'll just give you all a minute. Hi Emer, how are you? Joanna, how are you? And Claire,
morning. How
are you all keeping?
Good, how are you?
Grand. So, to Falsharow, you are very welcome to our meeting this morning. And I have to say, it's great to have a session like this, so current when within the span of the announcement and all of that. I think that's helpful, as it allows members to have a very keen focus and a quick follow-up on an important announcement, that was, as I have noted, anyone who was successful absolutely overjoyed, and a lot of, including in my own constituency, Ballina-Mallard United and Dungannon Swifts, and then also the impact on many other clubs and areas who lost out for now, and I know that's all part of the discussion, but it's good to have you here in that sense. So Emer, maybe if I come to yourself to make an opening statement, and then we'll go to questions from members. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to brief the committee on the Northern Ireland Football Fund this morning. So I am Emer Morelli, the Deputy Secretary for the Engaged Communities Group within the Department for Communities, and the Senior Responsible Owner for the Northern Ireland Football Fund. I'm joined today by my colleagues Joanna Gray, who is Director of Active Communities within the Department, and Claire Tobin, Head of the Northern Ireland Football Fund Performance Programme. The Northern Ireland Football Fund was conceived in 2011 under the name Sub-Regional Stadia Programme. It is an executive flagship programme and received strategic outline case approval in May 2024. The fund includes 3 strands, which reflect the original executive approval granted in 2011, but which takes account of the changed league setup and a more recent assessment of need. The 3 strands are the Performance Programme, the Grassroots Facilities Programme, and the creation of a National Football Centre with the Irish FA. Work is ongoing to develop policy proposals and seek business case approval for the Grassroots Facility strand, and once approval is received, a funding competition may open for grassroots clubs. The Irish FA have submitted a business case for the National Football Centre, which is being considered through the department's usual approval processes. And the performance programme has progressed after securing business case approval in December 2024, and last week progressed to the next stage following receipt and scoring of all applications. The performance programme is designed to invest in modernising performance club grounds across Northern Ireland. Performance clubs are defined as clubs who, at the time applications closed on the 14th of March 2025, were members of the Northern Ireland Football League or League of Ireland and play their home matches at a venue located in Northern Ireland. The performance programme was co-designed with key stakeholders and has 5 main objectives. 2 are linked to footballing need, 2 to the community benefits the facilities will provide, and the 5th objective is around financial sustainability. To ensure the application was robust, transparent and fair to all, we sought advice from internal and external sources. With that knowledge, we developed and tested an open competition approach which would enable assessment of clubs' individual needs, proposals and ability to deliver sustainable benefits. The TNIF team engaged with key stakeholders, business partners, the wider footballing family and other funding organisations. As SRO for the TNIF board, I took advice from board members, including economists, funding programme experts, legal representatives and finance partners. We adopted a tiered approach. If we scored all applicants against each other, larger projects had the potential to score highest in terms of ability to deliver benefits. However, we were mindful the smaller projects may be able to deliver more impactful outcomes for fewer people. The decision was made to adopt a tiered approach and allow similar sized projects to be scored against each other. This was supported by pre-engagement with clubs where they provided the anticipated individual project values. A rural needs assessment was completed in September 2024 and published online. No evidence to suggest any regional weighting was required was concluded as a result of that assessment. This was agreed at that time by all key stakeholders and no challenges were presented at that time to the approach. The invite to eligible clubs was sent on the 30th of January 2025, including application guidance and a scoring matrix. Eligible applicants were also offered places at information sessions held in various locations across Northern Ireland on the 4th, 5th and 6th of February. In addition, applicants could contact the TNIF team inbox and seek clarification on queries prior to the closing date. All documents, including a record of the questions raised and given at the information sessions and to the inbox, were published on the department's TNIF web pages. Applications opened on the 30th of January and closed at 5 p.m. on the 14th of March 2025. 37 applicants representing 38 performance clubs were received. One application was a joint claim made on behalf of 2 clubs. The 37 projects ranged in cost from around 700k to just under 28 million, with total project costs totalling around 190 million. The total DFC ask is over 164 million for all 37 projects. It is important to note that these costings are estimates at this stage. They will likely alter as projects progress through the various stages within the programme. The 37 applicants were assigned tiers as follows. Tier 1, so this was applications less than 1.5
I think
million.
we have that detail, Emer.
Okay.
We've seen that. If you could skip on past, we're aware of that.
Well, then maybe I'll come then to how the applications were assessed, scored and ranked. So eligible applicants were advised in the application guidance and at the information sessions that the projected costs of their project would determine what tier they were assigned to. The guidance also states their applications would be assessed in those tiers. Each tier was assigned an assessment panel comprising 2 assessors and 1 moderator. The moderator role was to consider each application and ensure accuracy, consistency and fairness of scores across the tier. Each assessor, using the scoring matrix that accompanied the invitation to apply, independently scored each application based solely on the information that was contained in the application. No other information or knowledge of the club influenced the assessor's score. Both assessors then came together to discuss their individual scores and agree a score for each application. Assessment sheets recorded any difference in scores and provided justification of the final agreed score. Next, the panel, which included both assessors and the moderator, met to discuss and finalise the score. In the event the moderator believed scoring was not consistent or did not reflect the content of the application, further discussion took place until a score was agreed and finalised. Any change made to a score after moderation is also recorded in the assessment sheets, along with the justification of that change. An independent moderator, an experienced funding assessor, then completed a random sample check on all applications from each tier to ensure consistency of approach and that the scoring matrix was applied correctly. 5 clubs allocated to Tier 1 did not provide sufficient detail in their application to achieve the minimum score required to be ranked, and therefore not eligible to proceed to the next stage in the process for this round of funding. Several factors had to be considered then when looking at applications to be brought forward as the prioritised cohort. Applications could only be taken in rank order from a tier. How selected applicants could best achieve all 5 objectives of the programme was the next consideration, and the total DFC financial ask of the selected applicants versus the available budget. Officials presented a range of potential combinations for the Minister's consideration, who had the final decision on what applicants would proceed to the next stage in the merit ranked order. On Thursday the 11th of September, the Minister announced he would be taking 20 applicants forward to the next stage. This selection comprises of the top scoring applicants from each of the 3 tiers. They have combined DFC ask of just over 82 million, nearly 50 million over the entire TNIF current budget. All applicants received formal notification on the outcome of their application last Thursday, the 11th of September, just before the Minister held the press event. Those not selected to move forward within the prioritised cohort have since been contacted by the TNIF team and are in the process of agreeing the earliest available date for a face-to-face meeting to discuss their application. Those who are included in the prioritised cohort have been asked to submit documentation and information to allow feasibility, financial and legal due diligence checks to commence. Staff will also be allocated to each prioritised cohort applicant to support them moving forward. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Emer. So that's very welcome and thank you. I'm going to keep my questions as short as possible because I know there's other members maybe whose areas have been worst impacted. So I suppose the 2 that really I want to get a sense of, and one of them's arising from your briefing. You'd said that there was no evidence that regional weighting was required. Is that not, in terms of the regional balance approached by the executive and the programme for government, is that not inherent? Is regional balance not always a consideration that should be taken for public monies?
So the rural impact assessment was carried out in line with the process. It was published and shared with all our stakeholders. I'm not talking about rural versus urban. I'm not talking about that. I'm asking about regional weighting. I'm asking about regional balance.
We could talk about the fact that we did do quite a lot of sectoral scoping work in advance and during the policy development process, and we had the Sports Ground Safety Authority, who are the UK and world recognised authority on safety at sports ground, carry out surveys on almost all of the eligible grounds, and so we knew that almost all of them needed investment right across the country, that there was no particular area or particular club that necessarily had a special case to be made. But we did still engage with stakeholders about whether there were certain things that they would want to see taken into account as part of the process. And regional weighting was not something that was brought forward that had any support. Clubs wanted to be able to compete on an even playing field.
Okay, and I do get that. I get that as well. However, I suppose if you're looking to promote sport, I suppose you're keen that it's promoted right across. And I do know that there are some, Institute and Ards in particular with no grounds. Like there just seems to be a bit of a mismatch. But I'll not dwell on that any further. My second and final question is around the budget allocation. So there's 36.2 million allocated here, a potential, and I understand that there's a potential where all the projects to be fully completed, it could be around that 82 million mark, and there's a question mark around where that budget's coming from, but that's not specifically my question. My question is more in relation to the 3 strands: the performance, the grassroots, and then the elite, the training centre. Is that 36.2 million allocated to cover all 3 of those strands?
So as stands at the moment, our budget is the 36.2 million. The Minister is seeking other funding sources. He's engaging with executive colleagues on budget allocation. I think we have very widely recognised we do not have enough budget for the 3 strands. We are working across the piece. The performance strand has come forward first. It's at a more advanced stage and is going forward. But I think the Minister, in his commentary, has been very, very clear that this is not the final piece of the TNIF programme. More money will be sought and secured where we can. This phase 1 of the performance is not the end of the performance tier. The National Football Centre, we are working very closely with the IFA, and while government contribution will be required for that, it will not be the full contribution towards that training centre. And as we look to the grassroots, we are looking at how we can establish a funding pot for that as well.
So,
we do not have enough money for the full programme, to answer your question.
Yeah, and I think the grassroots one's particularly important. I recall last year attending the City Hall. I'm looking forward to the event again this year, the Grassroots Awards and that. And it's fantastic to see the work, especially the work around diversity and inclusion, and a lot of very good work that's going on in those areas, and bringing people into sport who maybe hadn't the ability to access before. So I think it's really important. But in terms of your planning at this stage, how much is allocated now out of the 36.2 into what you've announced, and how much does that leave remaining for the other 2? As we stand, I understand you're saying you're going to seek more money, but as we stand, where do those other 2 strands sit?
So they're all actively alive, if you want to use that phrase. They're going through the various processes and proposals. As SRO of the overarching programme, I will need to make an assessment at some stage as to where we are with the performance clubs, how far advanced they are within the available budget I have, where grassroots is sitting, and are they at a stage where they can now then enter into allocation from the small pot we have, and where the football training centre also sits. I'm cognizant also that we're in the wider capital planning for the CSR at the moment, and we will be making the case through that. But as SRO, I will have to have all the advice available to me to understand what can be spent in a certain year, what can be allocated across each of the strands, and how we can progress. The main thing and the main, I suppose, challenge has been given to me as SRO is to get the programme running, to ensure that where we're able to give money, we are in the right stage to give money, make sure that the public purse is protected at all times in this, and if other funding sources are available, we need to look as how we can maximise those coming into our programme too. So it is challenging, Chair, but I can't give you precise figures today until all the various elements have concluded.
I do get that, Emer, and appreciate that. But in essence, what you're saying, it seems to me, is that at this point in time, with the Minister not having any more money, the grassroots now is contingent upon the 36.2 not all being taken up within the announcement that you have made on performance.
Depending on each year in question.
Yeah. Okay, listen, I'm going to move on to members. So I'm going to our Deputy Chair first, have Nicola, then I'm going to Mark, Morris, Brian and Kelly, in that order. And members would ask you all just be conscious that we have to divide the time up equally, and we need to move through. So please be succinct as you can with your questions, and Emer, please be succinct as possible, or members, please, officials, please be as succinct.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the 3 of you for your briefing here this morning. As you know, there's been much disappointment and condemnation about the poor geographical spread of the fund, as the Chair has already alluded to, especially in the North West. And I know within the documents we have and within the Minister's statement that he gave to the Assembly and that, there's been a lot of discussion about transparency, and he really tried to emphasise that point. So I just wonder, are you as a department willing to publish the scoring criteria and the weighting used in the assessments of the applications, and in particular, are we as a committee and as Assembly members able to be furnished with the options paper that you actually provided to the Minister? Actually, what recommendations you as a department or officials gave to the Minister?
So on the first point, all the information around the application process, the scoring matrices, the tiers are in the public domain. The regional impact assessment is also fully transparently in the public domain. With regard to the advice to a Minister, we will consider that under the various FOI or other arrangements available to us, and consider that under the legal framework that we operate in under those requests. I would also add, a lot of the information could be regarded as commercially sensitive too at this stage, so we'll need to consider where we go in respect of individual clubs.
Well, you'll understand, but it's because of the disappointment about, especially the geographical disparity, that people are concerned about that there and would like to have kind of more information. So I appreciate
Just to
that
be
maybe
clear,
not at this stage.
you did mention waiting. The application and guidance and the scoring matrix is available still on the departmental website. There was no waiting for any regional area.
Okay, that's all right. Thank you for that. I also, now, this isn't exactly directed at you, but part of the Minister's statement, he'd made reference to some of the applications being copied and pasted, and some had irrelevant irrelevant information within the applications, which, to be honest, I think is disrespectful and rude towards some of the clubs, because I'm assuming that there's loads of volunteers working within these clubs that actually take part in making these applications. They can't all afford to have consultants, so it's unbalanced in that there kind of regard. But it doesn't measure the level of need within each club. So, like, I don't expect you to comment on the Minister's commentary around that, but I would like to know what you're doing to make these processes a more level playing field for all clubs.
Okay, so look, we worked really closely with clubs and stakeholders to develop this. I'm very conscious that a lot of the feedback was about the fact that this was going to be a scheme where clubs would be applying for large amounts of money. And they were concerned about the fact that the process might be overly bureaucratic. We did everything we could to make sure that this was a very simple and straightforward process. We allowed projects to come forward that weren't fully developed. That's really unusual. Clubs didn't have to have planning permission. They didn't have to have full designs. They did have to have a good idea about, what they wanted and have done their community development, but that was within perfectly reasonable within the work that the clubs were doing already. And yeah, totally understand they're mostly volunteer run, even some of the clubs that people consider to be, big elite level clubs. But the application was deliberately made very straightforward. It asked about what clubs are doing now with their communities, what they would propose to do if their grounds were redeveloped. It asked about their financial situation, and it asked about their needs. We don't believe that it was necessary for clubs to have to outsource that. And indeed, some of the applications that we received from clubs weren't outsourced. They were completed by volunteers, and some of those applications were very good.
That is good to know, Joanna, but you can understand again those concerns where there are smaller clubs and they don't have the same kind of resources, and they'll not always reach the same level as other clubs that have that there. And
Ryan, I just think that speaks as well to the approach we took in comparing smaller clubs, the tiered approach that we took across the piece, and the amount of various investments people were asking for, to acknowledge, that small clubs may have more local benefits and impact, but they couldn't be compared to a large club with the wider piece. So we did not take that approach, and that was agreed across the stakeholders.
Finally, I just want to touch upon how the funding was announced. We were very disappointed in that there as well, that it didn't come to committee, it didn't even come to assembly. It was announced through the media initially back in August, in fact. And in fact, some clubs had been approached, according to newspaper articles, had been approached and asked for their emblems ahead of time. It was part of the newspaper article on the 17th of August. So that would suggest to other clubs that they were unsuccessful but hadn't actually...
Maybe take that. We can't obviously say what newspapers can publish or not, but with regard to that particular article, all clubs who had received funding from a separate programme, which was the Business Case Development Programme, had been approached to ask if we could use their images for various things, not for an announcement. So that was why it was all the clubs who had received funding under the Business Case Development Programme which were approached, not all clubs who had applied for the performance programme, and certainly not, as was indicated, that it was clubs that had been successful. It was a separate programme that those clubs have been contacted about.
Just on the point about the assembly, it's not usual for the outcome of funding, grant funding competitions to be announced in the assembly. Most funders simply publish on their webpage, the outcome of funding competitions.
I suppose, Joanna, when it's such a huge amount of money as well, people are interested in it.
We haven't actually allocated any funds at this point. We're simply moving clubs through a process and shortlisting them to get to the next stage. No expenditure decisions have yet been made.
But I still think Assembly members and committee members have the right to be aware of this here beforehand. And that's
We've
my question
acknowledged
to
the
you.
committee's position.
I would seek an assurance that it's brought to committee at least, so that we have the ability to scrutinise these here decisions as well.
No problem. We can
there's
certainly
no
come
political
to you.
influence when it comes to these decisions being made by departments or by any minister.
Look, certainly happy to come and brief you again as we move through this process, absolutely, to recognise your interest, of course.
Okay, thank you. And just to state on that point, the department is not simply a funder. The department and this committee is the statutory committee which scrutinises this department. So I don't think we're going to allow a situation to develop where the department decides that they'll pick and choose when they're funders and when they're not. That's actually further disrespect, I have to say. The fact that the announcement, and we're all very interested in sport, the fact the announcement was put on while this committee was meeting, I think further compounded that the strong feeling of members, and it's not good enough. Let's just be clear about that. It's not good enough. Okay, I'm going to move on now to Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome you all today. I just want to clarify at the outset, despite the Minister's protestations or accusations on Monday evening, I have not denigrated of you or your colleagues as officials in any way, nor will I, nor would I. Obviously, much of my public commentary to date has been around the neglect of the North West in terms of this fund, but it's fair to say that more than Derry City and Institute feel hard done by, and there are more clubs that very much appear to have been done or hard done by. Nicola there touched on the range of options and the publication of that. We as the Scrutiny Committee, I don't think should have to be reliant on FOI requests. I have one on, by the way, to get this information. But in terms of that range of options, are you at liberty today to tell us or give us a flavour of what they were when they had been provided to the Minister and when he indicated to you or informed you of his decision of how he would proceed, and was his ultimate, I suppose, direction contained in the list of options presented to him?
So, as SRO for the programme overall, I gave advice, and it's my role to give advice to the Minister. It is for the Minister then to consider that advice. I think it's really important, and the Chair touched on it in his opening comments, around budgets and tolerable limits, for example, on how far we can overplan. We have to look at the wider system here. We have to take advice. We have to take legal advice, finance advice, colleagues in procurement on what is actually doable in the market as well, and make a rounded decision. So while Minister was provided with the outcome of the frameworks and the assessment and scoring matrices, a contextual piece around the wider budget was also provided to him by me as SRO. That policy remains in development, as the Chair has acknowledged, with the grassroots stream and the National Training Centre also key components of the wider programme. So we are not at liberty today to open up that advice to the committee, but we will reflect on the committee's comments.
When I referred earlier to clubs feeling hard done by, it's my understanding that the number are actually currently considering legal action as well, or challenge to this decision. As regards to the submissions, and the Chair actually touched, as did Nicola, on regional balance too, was there any suggestion or recommendation in there, just maybe, although there wasn't a duty, but a recommendation around regional balance?
No.
And I can give my assurance as SRO that the scheme was published in a transparent and fully transparent way, and agreed matrices and agreed scoring was completed. The Minister had no role in that assessment of those applications to reach those scores. So the process from the perspective of the programme is what it is, as I outlined in detail this morning. That advice then was provided, and it was for the Minister to conclude. There was no, the outcome is the outcome. There was no further manipulation or anything of that nature following that transparent process.
I think it's the merit order is the important point here, that the merit order stood and was not available for the Minister to change. So any advice that might have required that to change couldn't have stood.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the merit order, with due respect. I'm talking about the decision and how many from each tier to go ahead with. I have been a minister before. I know that recommendations or submissions come up with a range of options, and ministers are sometimes encouraged or suggestions are made as to considerations that ministers should take around other issues when they're making decisions, including regional balance. Then I've only a couple more questions, Chair. The construct or structure of the application process itself seems to have been discriminatory against those clubs with no ground, and I'm sure Kelly will come on behalf of Hearts. I know my colleague Joe Boyle has been working with them as well, but also Institute, whenever it basically meant that they weren't permitted, or never mind required, to answer the safety, capacity and modernisation questions or elements under benefits around the current delivery section 2, which effectively means that they were disqualified from 40 of the points available to others.
So we structured the application form in such a way that clubs that didn't have a ground would be eligible to apply, and that they would actually have opportunities to score on slightly different criteria. So there was a section A and B that separated clubs who had an existing ground for those that didn't. But I think it's important to point out as well that what we were really trying to test, and this was developed with stakeholders, including clubs themselves, and they told us this is what they wanted to be tested on, was not just the physical need for their facilities, but also the impact that they made in their communities. And what we did see coming forward, and which we had heard from the sector in advance, was that even clubs without a physical ground or who were sharing a ground with another club were still delivering lots of impactful benefits in the community. So their current benefits were available to be scored. And that was everything from things that they were doing around their teams and their engagement of people. And then they talked about their future benefits that would be able to be delivered. So the points that were available to a club without a ground were equal to the points available to a club with a ground.
Well, obviously they've been significantly hamstrung in that regard, and issues around safety and community impact.
But there was 50 points available for clubs that met the criteria in Section A and 50 points available for clubs that met the criteria in Section B. A club without a ground has been successful. So I think it's really unfair to make a broad commentary at the moment, and we can provide a lot more detail to the committee if that's helpful around that criteria and the scoring.
But it is available.
Process.
Still, it is available on the website, and you can see the Section A, Section B.
It reminds me I've got that wrong. In terms of the over planning or over budgeting and the 82 million figure, which is 50 million more or more than double the existing budget, how was that figure actually reached at for the advice and testing, legal advice, finance advice? So was that done in consultation with Department of Finance? Because I mean that sort of overcommitment, isn't just impacting this year's Assembly budget, it's affecting potential future years and future mandates. Was my understanding there is a requirement for that sort of blessing from Department of Finance, if not the executive, to do so?
So we have not overcommitted a budget. We have overplanned on a programme, and sorry to be pedantic in the terminology, but that overplanning and the limit of tolerability against the risk profile that we know exists in this current programme in respect of timelines for delivery, procurement issues, planning permissions, etc., we've been able to build in a certain level of tolerability there. That has been informed, yes, through our own legal advice, our own advice within the department in respect of budget and what we have available, and also then the wider CPD advice around procurement. But we have not overcommitted to any level of expenditure at this stage without executive approval, which we do not have. We have overplanned for a programme, cognizance of the risks that may emerge through that and reduce the actual requirements. Conversely, some of the projects, when they go through due diligence and they reach the tender stage or they look at their design stage, may increase in cost. And those are breakpoint really in the conversation that we are having to ensure that the best use of public money is the number one priority and criteria for this scheme.
So there hadn't been discussions with Department of Finance on this?
The Minister has given a commitment that he will seek additional funding across the piece, but that's subject to separate budgetary considerations that the Executive are engaged in at the current time. This programme has overplanned by a certain amount to ensure that there's enough rolling programmes that we can use the money. The worst thing that could happen is that we don't have enough projects going forward to use the money available, and that's the basis of this approach, the phasing approach. But when Minister says this is not the end of the programme, he will be reliant on further monies coming forward to allow a further phase to come forward.
We do also have overall approval for the overall programme, all three strands at strategic outline case level, which was signed off by the Department of Finance, and it predicted that the budget required to meet all potential need would be significantly more than the budget available. And the Department of Finance were also cited on the programme level business case for the performance programme, which again predicted that we would face much greater demand than the available budget, but set out that we would deal with it in the way that Emer's described.
Okay, so Mark, I'm going to have to move on, but what we will do at the end of the session, there may be a number of outstanding questions which we will forward to the department in writing and seek a response on. But for now, to be fair to all members, are going to move on and see how we get on. Morris, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't know how I'm going to be brief, but I'll try. I have to echo the comments that were made about the North West, and I have to highlight the fact that the North West is not Derry City and Institute. It's Derry City, Institute, Coleraine, Port Stewart and Limavady Valley, not a brown penny.
And Strabane.
And what do you call it? Something, anyway, can't remember Strabane's home ground. That aside, that gives a very, very damning perception in the public eye, rightly or wrongly. It gives a very, very bad perception of the department's work in delivering this funding. The second thing I would raise is if you take each successful applicant, and good luck to them and well done to all those who have progressed, if you take what they have been awarded in each tier at face value, it adds up to 36 million. So if they get no more but get less, is the only opportunity for money to be in the budget, because the budget's spent on allocations according to tier.
I think we need to be clear that the tiers are not, we haven't awarded any funding, no expenditure decisions have been made, and the tiers are not indicative of the awards that could be made either. The tiers simply sought to divide the clubs into small, medium and large sized projects, but we deliberately communicated that clubs should not apply for an arbitrary amount. There was no cap on the application, which is common with other funding schemes, that you might have a cap to manage expectations and awards, and grantees then have to work within that cap and cut their cloth essentially to manage their projects. We didn't say that to these clubs because we knew that the need would not be met by part funding projects, by half funding projects, and so we wanted clubs to bring forward fulsome projects rather than, you know, just something within an arbitrary cap.
I think you're missing the point. If each club in each tier receives the minimum amount allocated, not 1.526 or whatever, the minimum amount allocated, it all adds up to 36 million. That's the first point, and that you can't dispute a mathematical fact.
We don't believe that that would be able to demonstrate value for money, and we would not be able to achieve approvals on that basis.
Then we'll have to go back to the drawing board.
So we started with the potential to divide the budget across all of the clubs that had need, but we quickly moved away from that. The Minister made a policy decision that the evidence didn't support that, to simply give everyone a drop of the funding, that actually the evidence showed that it would be only worth taking forward a programme that would achieve value for money on a project by project basis.
Don't dispute that, but I'll repeat it so that you understand it. Every tier, if you add up the amount in all three tiers, it adds up to 36 million. That's the minimum funding available. You did say earlier on that some projects would maybe take more money, some may take less. But as it stands at the minute, mathematically, it all adds up to 36 million.
Martha, are
So
you
the
talking
fund's
just
gone.
about the, sorry to interrupt, Chair,
Go ahead.
are you talking about the 20 tiers that, or the 20 clubs that progress to the next
Yes,
stage, or all?
All 20.
And just giving
Each
them, say
tier.
for example, in the middle tier clubs giving them 1.5 million?
That would not
wasn't-
mean, it's not the premise of the programme, and it's not the,
Consideration.
the approvals that we have would
Why
not.
is it black and white then?
Because it wouldn't meet the need that has been well established and well
I think you're
documented.
Yeah, maybe
conflating.
point.
I think you might be
Move on.
conflating the tiers with with an award cap. The tiers are not intended to apply an award cap or minimum amount.
I'm not confusing them.
No, but they were a boundary rather than an allocation.
If you take the boundary adds up to 36 million.
That's true,
Yeah,
but
no.
if we were to give, say for example, sorry Chair, if we were to give, say for example, the clubs in the middle tier, where at the minute we have the most clubs moving forward, say we gave them on 1.5 million, that would not meet their need, you know, across those number of clubs. It wouldn't meet the needs in terms of community benefits. It wouldn't meet their footballing need in terms of replacement facilities. It would be a drop in the ocean for some of those clubs. So, and it wouldn't then bring the benefits and the outcomes that for the fund in general.
But I think we are misunderstanding your question. Would you contend that that should be the way that
Tier 1, 5 applicants. Tier 2, 13 applicants. Tier 3, 2 applicants. If you add all the awards within the tiers, it adds up to 36 million. Bottom line.
But those
take
aren't
more,
the
someone
awards
take
within the
less.
tiers.
Bottom line, 36 million. For all those clubs.
you would be using the £1 million figure for tier 1, a £1.5 million figure
tier
for
two,
tier
add it all
2,
up.
and a £6 million figure for tier 3.
That's
I'm
36
afraid
million.
that's entirely coincidental. Was not.
Well, a strange coincidence. But anyway, we'll leave it there. I think I've argued that enough, Chair. The other point I wanted to make was Mr. Lawler, during a media interview, referenced other criteria. What was that other criteria? He also referenced sustainability and turkeys coming home to roost, a derogatory remark to the clubs who were unsuccessful. What was that criteria? And did the Minister meet the IFA in Niffle? Or did Niffle and the IFA have a meeting prior to the announcement and have knowledge of what clubs were successful going through?
No, absolutely not.
And we can't comment on Mr. Lawler's commentary in the press.
I think it's worth.
It's not the department's position.
It is worth saying that we did a lot of work with clubs in advance and during the development of the policy development process, and with the IFA and NIFL, also with the Chief Leisure Officers Association, with Sport NI, Sports Ground Safety Authority, lots of other key stakeholders. And we knew that all of the clubs had need. Even some of the clubs that didn't apply actually probably still have physical facilities need for modernisation. It may be just at such a low level that that's why they opted not to apply. But we would definitely contend that this sector has demonstrated need across the board.
You worked with the clubs,
We did.
and why had so many clubs got unsatisfactory applications, and if they were helped by the department?
I think it's unfair to say that many clubs had unsatisfactory
Well, I'm only quoting the Minister.
applications. I don't think he said unsatisfactory applications. They varied in quality. I think is the input. They varied in quality, but many, and I speak, I moderated part of this. Many of the clubs, the applications were great, and most met the standard required. But it was just we had the Minister then had to consider these are this is the outcomes I want with the money that I can have available to me with over planning. But I don't think it's fair to say unsatisfactory. There were 5 that didn't meet minimum requirements out of the 37. So that's
They had help.
Sorry, Mark.
They had help from the officials.
All clubs had support
All
from
clubs
officials.
had exactly
I think
the same access.
we need to just suggest we did not help the clubs complete their
No.
applications. We provided support in terms of briefing sessions. We put information on our website, but we didn't actually sit down with them to complete their applications.
And any questions raised during those sessions or emailed into our inbox were published for all clubs to see.
Because we were cognizant that, if you were attending one session, different questions might be raised that would be helpful to others in a different session. So we tried to be as transparent as possible.
Final question, I won't be brief. You referenced the Minister having meetings with NIFL and the IFA, And
we
the next
didn't.
stage- No, sorry, I have it written down. I referenced
Yeah,
it.
no, they.
Officials did meet
Officials.
regularly with
The
them.
Minister, prior to making the announcement, as part of his speech, had alluded to meetings with NIPL and the IFA.
By officials. So we had an advisory working
So-
group.
What I'm asking is the original football fund was granted to, well, the three sports. The IFA used their share to develop Windsor Park. The remaining was to be for the clubs. I'm now asking a question. Where do you get, well, there's no money for grassroots, and there's certainly no money for a national centre. Do you not think the Minister would be better, if he gets extra money, to concentrate that extra funding to the clubs who need it?
So to clarify, we haven't said there's no money for grassroots or the National Training Centre. We are working within a pot of money that is to cover those three strands of the programme. Once we have clarity on how much is needed, and this is back to how we manage in year with budgets and allocations, we will be able to give advice to the Minister on we need to put X towards grassroots, we now need to put X towards here. There's a level of over-planning in the performance strand, and we acknowledge that within tolerable limits. And I think that's very, very important. We are not, as public servants, saying we will take X amount of taxpayers' money without due diligence, without approvals, without scrutiny. But we have opened the sub-regional, TNF, as was the sub-regional stadia programme, and we will now continue the momentum within that programme under the Minister's direction. The Minister has been very clear that he will continue to seek further funding, be it from alternative sources, be it from within the wider executive.
Just one point, and that's it.
Bear in mind, Morris, that you can submit further
Well, I'm
questions.
going-
Be really
yes,
brief. I've given you a fair bit of
this year.
tolerance.
Use this funding. Might be a coincidence, I don't think it is, but it all adds up to 36 million, and therefore the funding is gone.
Well, but it doesn't, because the bottom tier was projects from 0 to 1.5 million. So actually, if you take the bottom amount for each tier,
No,
that would
no
see
zero.
5 clubs
Sorry,
receiving nothing.
You need to go back and read your
So the
press
first,
release.
the tier 1 was 0 to 1.5 million, then 1.5 to 6 and over 6. If you logically take the lowest amount in each of those tiers, in tier 1 the lowest amount would be nothing for the 5 clubs, then 1 million, then 6 million. But again, it was not intended to be an award level. It was intended to divide projects into small, medium and large sized groups.
New one, it's a new one for me, awarding nothing.
We're going to have to move on, Morris. You've
Yeah,
already
my
touched on that.
apologies,
You
Chair.
can put in further detailed
Yeah.
questions. You want to draw it out, but I'm going to go to Brian.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the answers so far. Speaking in the Assembly Chamber this week, I did commend the Minister for bringing this fund forward, and I understand the disappointment of those who are not progressing to the next stage, but he has progressed it after previous ministers stalling this for political purposes, going back 14 years. So obviously the funding available could have achieved much more if it had been allocated sooner. What I'm hearing you say today, that the merit ranked, the applications were independently scored and the merit ranked order was not changed
No.
by the Minister. So the scoring was done independently and was not changed. Also, it's in
Question,
your...
please, Brian.
But just to clarify, I'm just seeking clarification on these matters, so that's clarified. Obviously, the 20 applications progressing are not guaranteed to receive funding. They're just progressing to the next stage of the process. And to recap, Chair, on your original question...
Brian, I'm going to stop you there. We don't need the scheme and the announcement recapped here. We've all taken a keen interest in that. We want to get on to questions and get to other members' questions. We're well aware of these issues.
Well,
move on,
we're using
I'm
up
going to
time.
have to move on.
Well, you're saying there hasn't been an allocation specifically for the performance clubs, the grassroots facilities and the National Training Centre. It's all working within the budget, 36.2 million at this stage. My question is, has any increased budget been achieved above the 36.2 million at this stage, and what are the prospects of that being increased?
So we are working very closely, both within terms of additional budget to secure that, but also at alternative funding sources. So we have required, a requirement of this scheme was the partnership level of funding as well provided by clubs, but we're also looking at any other methods and any other available funding sources, and really trying to be as innovative as we can be in the time of severe budget constraint as to how we can take this additional, I suppose, ask forward.
At this stage, the budget is still 36.2 million that is available, but the Minister and officials are seeking to increase that. That's all that comes in. Okay.
Thank you, Brian. Kelly?
Thank you, Chair. And my previous colleague, Chris Little, would be throwing a party that the sub-regional stadia has actually progressed now to the Northern Ireland Football Fund, but I am from Strangford and Newton Ards is in my area. I am concerned that the additional information that was asked at information sessions hasn't actually been included in the further information and clarification on the website. I have evidence from at least 2 clubs that there was concerns raised in advance about the scoring matrix that was based on the need to provide evidence about already having a grounds. They raised that with the assessors. The assessors agreed with them and explained that, yeah, they wouldn't score very well in that part. So I'm just wondering if we could have a review to see when, especially from Avenel Leisure Centre, how those questions were gathered and have they all been included?
Let's be clear on this. I was there. Yes, some clubs without grounds raised that one of the questions in the application form concerned previous capital investment in grounds.
And safety and current benefits provided?
Yeah, so current benefits provided were not necessarily related to an existing ground. Current benefits being provided could quite easily have been described by clubs in terms of benefits being delivered to their teams, their participants, their volunteers, their spectators, the communities within which their club was competing.
I see a breakdown of the way that those scores then were allocated on that basis, because I believe that the clubs that don't have grounds weren't scored in that.
But as Emer's pointed out, a club that doesn't have a ground has been taken forward in the prioritised cohort. So
I'm not saying that not all of them have done that. You
yeah.
don't need to be defensive with me about that. It's just I would like to know. Avenel Leisure Centre is one prime example of where a club did raise concerns about those questions, but it's not on the website for further information and clarification. Okay. It's just, can we have a look at that to see why that wasn't included there?
Sure, of course. And sorry, not intending to be defensive, but I do want to defend my team, because we did not say at any of the information sessions that we agreed that the scoring or the application was unfair. And that did not happen. What we did say was that not every applicant would be able to score full marks in every question. And that was recognised. But that did not mean that the process was unfair. Some clubs could not score full marks in terms of additional partnership funding. We knew that not all clubs would be able to bring as much additional partnership funding as others.
Can I ask then, does that mean then that some of the clubs that scored higher were not included in the awards, the 20?
No.
I'm just wondering how that was decided, because
what I mean is not everyone could score the same marks.
Not everyone could score the full marks.
Not everyone could score
the
full marks in every question. Mm-hmm. But that's the nature of a competitive grant funding scheme, where we have to have some questions that allow some clubs to score more in one question than another. But what we tried to do was provide as broad a suite of questions based on what we knew about the clubs and what we'd taken from stakeholders that would give everybody a chance to score in at least some of the sections.
So I'll just clarify for you. The clubs that don't have grounds couldn't score as well as others who do have grounds.
They could.
No, they couldn't on safety, and I have evidence of this.
Sorry, but that was very much recognised. And also, so for example, in questions about need.
So did any club that scored higher than Ards or scored lower than Ards?
I can't talk about individual
That's
clubs
why we need
but
to
on
see
the basis of
comparison.
need, it was recognised, for example, that clubs without grounds, would perhaps naturally score higher than clubs that have grounds.
And the clubs without grounds are saying very clearly that they feel as if they've been penalised, and until we see the scores and there's a transparency there, without a freedom of information request having to go in, we can provide information to a committee in confidence. And to be honest, as a scrutiny committee under recommendation 38 of the RHI outcomes, we are entitled to provide scrutiny. The other thing I wanted to ask then is the Minister has talked about rolling funding, so why was any club knocked out? If there's rolling funding to go over many years.
And that's where it's really important, and that's, as SRO of the programme, I have to make an assessment of tolerability. So yes, we could come in and say we need £1 billion for sports clubs across all of Northern Ireland. For TNF, I need to take an assessment based on risk of really what is the actual financial need, which we know. We know then what is the ability to deliver, what is the sustainability of the investment, what is the value for money of that investment. And this is to the point. We need to take the advice around that piece. It does not mean that we are not continuing to seek and secure additional funding. We are. But within a cohort, to take through a level of 80 million is a significant overplan. It's tolerable, but it's significant. To take through 200 million as an overplan does not stand.
80 million, 200 million, not one penny's been spent yet, and the 20 who've been through this current stage, not all of them are guaranteed money at the end of the day. So if there was planned to be a rolling funding, I don't understand why there was a cap put at this stage. There may well be people, or clubs, within that group that will come first, but why knock the others out? Because they're going to have to spend even more money now to put in applications for the future.
But we took a policy decision based on intensive engagement with stakeholders, including clubs, that we would run a competitive grant competition in order for clubs to be able to make applications and be assessed and scored and ranked within a merit order. No clubs suggested that that was not how they wanted the programme to proceed. No
when
key
clubs
stakeholders
raised an issue with the questions that were being asked that couldn't be answered and scored highly. Well, they did, and I've got written evidence of it. So we'll move on.
They raised that some questions would not allow some clubs to score as highly as in other questions, and we accepted that that was the case, because if every question had the ability to allow every applicant to score full marks, we would have no way to rank and create a merit order.
You didn't create a merit order then because you deliberately then excluded some of the clubs from being able to score?
We did not deliberately exclude any clubs.
We can provide more detail to the committee on that point.
I really do want to make the point that we understand that clubs are disappointed because we've been working with them and we know there are really good projects out there and there is need across the board. But the team have been working really hard on this, and fairness and transparency have been at the core of everything that we have done. And I think, some of the criticism that has been levelled has been, particularly in sort of social media and so on, has been very much assumed that there was some manipulation or change to, that happened after the application process closed. I can assure you that is absolutely not the case.
So I can ask you then, from the advice that was provided to the Minister, of the clubs that would be recommended by the department, from the work that you have done, all that hard work, did the decision change?
No.
At all?
No.
So we can get a copy of that then?
So from the Minister making the decision on the 14th of August for the option to take forward...
No, I asked about the final decision then.
The final decision of the number of clubs to take forward in the first cohort?
No,
or the
I asked
scoring?
The advice that was provided to the Minister about the clubs that were going to be part of that 20, the shortlist down for this stage. Did it change from the departmental advice to the Minister until the final decision was put into the public?
I just want to be absolutely clear. So the advice that we presented to the Minister was presented after a merit order had been created for each of the 3 tiers, and included a number of combinations of numbers of clubs from each tier that could be taken forward. Is that and so that was the advice that you're asking about, is whether a decision changed after that. No, the Minister made a decision in the middle of August about taking forward 20 clubs.
How could a Minister make a decision on who the clubs were?
He didn't make a decision on who the clubs were. He made a decision.
So I'm not asking you that, please.
Sorry,
listen
I'm misunderstanding that.
I am asking, when the advice was provided to the Minister to detail those 20 clubs, before it came to the Chamber, was there a change from the advice provided by the department to the clubs that the Minister announced?
No.
And can we see the evidence of that?
We will take that back.
But a merit order was produced by the scorers and moderated.
The merit order has no bearing on this.
So
Chair,
then
it would be helpful if that clarification was given in writing to the department to be able to respond.
Well, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, listen, I'm going to come back to. I'm going to let you go and come to members then for a quick roundup on the session. Clearly, there are huge concerns. I think that's evident within the committee session. A number of times you mentioned the minister, and this is in relation to what appears to be a vast overreach in terms of the budget. Although I accept no budget has been allocated, and you've said several times that the minister is seeking alternative sources of funding. Is the minister seeking alternative sources of funding for other sports as well?
The Minister is committed to sport, and he has made a number of various public announcements around that, and he recognises the need across all sports.
Is he seeking alternative sources of funding for Casement Park, for example?
So that is all subject to the wider budget discussions. So,
but there's I got a impression that there's an extra. The Minister is actively seeking for alternative sources of funding for this. Are other sports being treated equally in that respect?
So we are looking as officials, for example, at financial transactions capital as an alternative funding. Is that available? Is it a model that could potentially fit here? Could it fit with other sports? So we are looking at anything that's available to us to try and increase the funding. We are very cognizant of officials and wild sport, and I will be here in 5 minutes on heritage, culture and creativity too. We are competing with other key programme for government requirements and commitments too. So it's incumbent on us to really bring all the best advice available to Minister for all the pressures across the areas, and that includes alternative funding.
Okay, can you provide the committee with the evidence of what engagements have taken place by the Minister or Department in relation to accessing additional or alternative funding in relation to what you've said here? So I like that. Andy, it had to be very, very brief now. I wasn't counting for you.
Yeah, Chair, just one question, I'll follow the rest up. See, in terms of the process, Emer, you'd mentioned an independent moderator. Did the independent moderator raise any concerns or any feedback in relation to the process at all?
So there may have been some, but no major concerns is what I can say. There may have been some small issues.
The independent moderator did raise concerns.
No concerns about the process?
No concerns about the process.
But he did raise about certain... Right.
She completed a full report to us, so was happy because her role was to moderate both within the tiers and across the tiers.
We have that report, please.
Well, requested in your written.
Would there be any reason why we wouldn't get it?
I think there are some issues around, and we have had freedom of information requests in relation to release of information about individual club applications, and we're considering those. But I think it's important to make the point that clubs may want to apply to other funding schemes. Clubs may want to take forward their projects in the absence of funding from DFC.
Sorry, Joanna, how would that in any way impact you forwarding on the independent? Is there any issue with forwarding on the independent reporter's report?
It will be talking about clubs' project information, and we need to consider whether that could prejudice them in making applications to other sources.
We're also talking about confidence in the process.
So we will take the comments away from today, Chair. We understand that the frustration from the committee. We will do our best. We have started this process in a transparent and fair way, and that is our aim, to continue in that way. We will take back all your queries and respond as best we can.
Thanks, Emer. I do appreciate that, but I do want to state it's not simply frustration by the committee. We are reflecting widespread concern, and we are seeking to apply scrutiny in that sense on behalf of those people who are expressing those concerns. It goes much wider than the committee. So.
Did I pick up during the presentation that a moderator had changed marks and then they were scrutinised again? So we could have the two reports, please.
No, just to be clear, that's not the case.
That was the internal moderator.
Internal moderator and then
external
moderator.
Did the external moderator have authority to change marks or recommend changes?
No, they didn't
to
have
marks?
authority to change marks, but they were moderating, so that would have been passed back to the scorers and the internal moderator to consider, of course, yes. So,
are there any changes made then?
I think it's important to say as well that this process does not deviate from normal processes of scoring and moderating grant applications, and that in advance of the publication of the documentation, the process was thoroughly scrutinised internally with all of our business partners. It was scrutinised by our legal advisors in the Departmental Solicitor's Office, and the overarching approach was thoroughly tested with stakeholders. After the application process then closed, We followed the process to the letter in terms of what has been published on the website. Nothing was changed, no goalposts were moved, no weightings were applied. Minister did not change his mind after he made decisions. And I think those are some of the criticisms that have been levelled at us, and there is no evidence to suggest anywhere that those criticisms are valid. And so we do want to be clear that we...
Very briefly now, I need to move this on.
I've asked a question about after the department did its work and provided it to the Minister, was there a change in the 20? We don't have any evidence to say that didn't happen or it did happen.
There's no...
We've given an undertaking, Kelly, that we will come back on the back of that written correspondence.
Be very clear on that.
Can I also say, while there may have been, and there certainly has been criticism, this committee are asking questions, and that is not the same as criticism, and is not inherently anything about asking questions. That is scrutiny.
Of course, Chair.
Okay, listen, thank you for the...
Mark.
Pardon?
Andy and Mark.
I'm going with Andy only because Mark's has been in a few times. Andy only very briefly.
I just want to understand, where do we go from here? I haven't heard much about that. So what is the next phase of the process and the timeline?
Phase of the process, very briefly, Chair, I'll keep it as quick as I can. The next phase of the process is that the 20 clubs that are in what we call the prioritised cohort, I know it's a bit of a fancy term, are now into the due diligence stage, which will look at 3 real aspects: legal, financial and feasibility. So legal is around sort of the ownership of the ground, that sort of stuff. Financial, we'll look at their accounts, because obviously we have to be a funder of last resort. We'll look at their viability, those sorts of things. Then the feasibility looks at the sort of construction side of it, and as do you have a consultant in place, that sort of thing. So it's a fairly straightforward process for the next, it won't require any specialist knowledge. The club will be able to take that forward, and we will then be considering that information in conjunction with colleagues at Strategic Investment Board, DSO and Central Procurement Directorate.
Given it's straightforward, how quickly will that be done?
We will move forward as quickly as clubs can provide it. So they have a closing date of, I think off the top of my head, it's the 8th of October to have that information with us. But we will take that information as soon as it's provided to us, and then say we will work with our colleagues in those various to go through that information. Following that, we move on then to the various cases, providing that there's nothing that's thrown up in due diligence insurmountable. We then move to the business case stages, because there's 3 stages of business case after that, but we will support clubs through those
Due
stages.
diligence process isn't sort of a start and end, it will continue on. This is to identify initial issues that clubs may need to address as they go through their business case process, but that legal, financial and feasibility process continues right throughout the project life cycle, and some projects are much more complicated than others.
Finally, Chair, and when do you anticipate then you'll be able to say to clubs that are going to come out the other end, right, that's your award, you've got an award?
We don't anticipate that at any point any of these projects will have a full award that will guarantee them to reach completion. We expect that this will be done on a phased basis, where we award them initially funding to develop their business cases, then funding to take their project further, likely through design to planning, before we get to construction awards.
Okay, so we're far from the sub-regional stadia, the football fund now being rolled out then?
In what way?
In theory, and
like diggers on the ground,
yeah,
sort of.
Because that's ultimately what
Again,
it
it will
is.
depend on the state of readiness of the clubs. Some will have planning, which obviously will take a big chunk out of that process. If some clubs already have planning for what they want to do, smaller projects, for example, that at the tier 1 end that only require, for example, replacement pitch and some floodlights, we expect and naturally would probably move forward much quicker than the big ones that require demolition, planning, all that sort of stuff. But we will meet clubs where they're at, and we will take them forward in the state of readiness that they're at, and we will offer every available assistance, because we do recognise that footballing as a sector will need our assistance with this process, and we've committed to that.
How do you make sure then that within that, those clubs that are sort of ready with the smaller projects, and given on Mars's point around the bands, it doesn't swallow up all of the money, and those clubs that need more in-depth work don't miss out?
So look, projects will move forward based on their state of readiness from this point on. So for the prioritised cohort, their merit order is no longer relevant. So achieving approvals will move projects forward faster than others. We don't want this to be a race. We will work with them to make sure that those projects are achieving value for money and are going to deliver the maximum amount of benefits for the sport and for communities. Yep. But they will move forward based on state of readiness.
But I think by the process the department has in theory created a race, because you've the 36.2 million. I appreciate that that's not fundamentally allocated. Then you've got the tolerability. So I think out there on the ground that is.
Projects will have to pass through planning approvals, design, all of these other quite challenging stages that come with capital development. So it's not something that you can race through even if you want to.
Okay,
I think the important message, the programme has started. It's open. The money will flow in due course, and more money is required, and we fully accept and acknowledge that to meet the need that's been identified across all clubs.
Every final point, Mark.
It's fair to say everyone wants to see delivery, but we'd spoken of the risk and the over planning. Now readiness becomes a consideration now. Would it not have been prudent to have readiness as a consideration prior to now, to prevent, as the Minister put it, further erosion of the value of this fountain?
We did consider that at the outset in developing the policy proposals, and that is dealt with in the strategic outline case, and we looked at that as an option of a way to move forward, but the evidence suggested that it would be better to allow all clubs to compete on, again, a level playing field, regardless of the state of readiness of their project at the outset, and also to recognise the long delay that the programme has experienced, that clubs couldn't all keep planning permission in place. So again, we opted not to weight them for projects that were further down the road, and that was very much supported by stakeholders, as was all of this prior to the announcement.
Okay, listen,
they're not going to get it in
back.
place anytime soon, a lot of them. No planning.
So we're going to this is going to be an ongoing piece of work as this unfolds. So we'll take it that way. So I'm going to ask yourself to leave and come to committee members. I'm going to then take a short break, and then we're coming back for the next section. So members, picking up on any points there, and I'm going to suggest two issues. If members want to raise something immediately and briefly, that's fine. Or also, if there are further questions arising out of the evidence we've heard that members would have put in, I'm going to suggest maybe that those can be forwarded on to the clerk for compiling, if the members are content with that. Okay, Kelly?
I was going to ask Chair to go into closed session because I have a legal query then I would like asked, but I can certainly send that on to the clerk and maybe we can hear it in closed session at a later point. There are concerns just about what has been said today.
Thank you, Kelly.
Can I just ask, following on from Kelly's request of those in briefing about if the Minister changed his mind based on the options he was given, like that was based on the 20 projects that were going forward. Were there options for more than 20 to go forward? Were there 22, 23, whatever? I'd like to ask that question to him as well, basically.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, they've been given a range of options, and it's how that one was decided on and what other considerations I think he was asked to have or take.
Okay.
On a procedural basis, Chair, the sub-regional economic plan requires regional balance. Why was that not considered as part of this? Because in what this programme of funding is going to be delivering will have an economic outcome for areas. I just don't understand why that was discounted completely whenever that is a piece of information that all departments are supposed to regard.
The first question I raised, actually, I do fully agree with you. I think that is a key concern.
Sure. The other point that I have, and you remember the refresh and re-engage piece, and there was a significant focus of that around the change in landscape, and it's important and it's great to see that we've moved on to this next phase, but it seems to be the amount of information available to us as a committee around the grassroots piece is very limited, but the whole emphasis of the refresh and re-engage was the change in landscape, grassroots, the women's game, etc.
I think, Chair, that for me, that's where some of my problems with this come, that we heard promises about, particularly around support for the women's game, and I'd like to know some of those community outcomes that are in, and the benefit to the community. Are there going to be boundaries set there? Are there going to be targets set there, like potentially a clawback if they don't actually reach that community benefit, particularly around that support for grassroots football within the communities surrounding these clubs, and also then around the women and girls sport?
And I'm further to that worried around, will there be funding available for grassroots at all, given this?
Or no, just to finish my point, and the whole tolerability piece and that engagement with finance, surely the department must have some idea as to the budget that they're setting for each. They must have some idea. You know, they're not just going to pluck this out of the sky. You know, I'm not being flippant, but they must have some idea, and I didn't hear that, in fairness. You know, right, we're looking at A, B or C for grassroots. The IFA are going to need X amount for the new training facility, etc. So
a question, we seek a question.
I think so,
drawing
yeah.
out some clarity on that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that had been with DFC's finance division, that there's been no tic-tacking with the Department of Finance, which I think is extraordinary.
Claire, can I check, are you content that you have the detail of any questions arising there?
So the questions so far are about documentation and additional information to the committee regarding the change of landscape in terms of the and with regard to the level of budget available for each of the level of the strands of the programme.
Given the department, when they were in with us previously, they talked a lot about the refresh and re-engage piece initiated by the previous minister, and it appears now that I don't want to say parked, but hasn't come forward in this phase. So, you know, when are we likely to see that coming forward, particularly the grassroots, the women's game, you know, disability as well? When are we likely to see that? What is the budget that's going to be allocated to that?
I think it's important that we compile the pieces of information that weren't available here today and have been promised to be sent on, that we're forensic about having all of that from the session.
The other one that we almost got to is where marks changed subject to that external moderation. Because I've heard from some clubs that their marks aren't matching the remarks.
Yeah, I get that too.
Were any scores changed at what point, sorry?
Subsequent to the external moderation.
Maybe we should ask what the changes were, because I think it's been made clear the moderation process will almost, by its nature,
Well, that was
change.
the internal one. They didn't concede it haven't happened external. It says the independent external moderator couldn't change the marks, but they could recommend that marks be changed, and we don't know that any
It appears to
actually were.
suggest that the moderator may have given some feedback. So what was that feedback within the confines of being able to share that?
Okay, members, thank you. We're going to take a very short break now before we go into our next session, and we are significantly behind time, so bear that for the next one. We'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Can I ask the...
Committee Room 29, Sound. 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 Committee Room.
Long time no see you.
Like nice.
Okay, members, thank you. We're in public session. So we're moving to committee's agenda item 11, departmental briefing on the Heritage, Culture and Creativity programme. So members' papers for this agenda item start at page 791, and I now welcome the following officials to the meeting. So we're once again joined by Emer Morelli, Deputy Secretary of Engaged Communities Group, Iain Greenway, Director of Culture, Manus Deery, Director of Historic Environment, and John Ball, Heritage, Culture and Creativity Lead. Emer, I invite you to make a brief opening statement before we move to questions from members. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to brief you today on the Heritage, Culture and Creativity programme. It's a significant piece of work in a very important area. In opening, I would like to apologise and to thank the committee for its understanding in relation to the delay in scheduling this first in-person briefing on the Heritage, Culture and Creativity programme. This was initially scheduled for March, but by that time we were in the midst of developing the document that has now been published and would not have been in a position to offer as full as an exposition as we would now like to do today. Returning to the substantive business of today, with your permission, Chair, I would like to say a few further words of introduction and to address one or two important issues that I anticipate may be of interest to the committee before taking any questions you may have. The Minister's intention for the HCC programme is that it should provide a platform to drive support for and engagement with culture and heritage interests by the Department and, importantly, across the executive departments and beyond. It brings a focus that has been perhaps missing until now on the contribution the sectors already make across a wide range of policy areas and the great potential for them to bring their particular expertise, experience and creativity to do even more. In that regard, the programme goes some way to addressing the sense, sometimes expressed by people working in these areas, that their work and their contribution is not valued by government. The initial phase of the programme is focused on the development of a coherent package of culture and heritage-related policies in respect of the arts, museums, public libraries and the historic environment. However, we are also considering a further phase of work that is likely to include work with the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland on a policy on archives. The scale and ambition of the HCC programme and the pace at which it must be developed is in itself a manifestation of the significance of the issues it is addressing and their value in achieving life-enhancing and often life-changing opportunities and experiences for people. You will know that in July this year, the Minister published the HCC programme purpose and framework. The framework is an important milestone in the development of the programme. It outlines its context, purpose and direction, and importantly includes a set of draft high-level aims for each policy, along with some early indications of a number of important emerging programme-wide actions. The policy aims and emerging actions have been identified through a programme of stakeholder engagement, review of evidence, and assessment of approaches and experience in neighbouring jurisdictions. The work is also building on the important contribution and the extensive engagement and consultation that was undertaken by the Culture, Arts and Heritage Task Force. In leaning into their engagement, we have listened to voices coming from the sector which said they didn't want another lengthy engagement process, but wanted to see progress on solutions. In taking forward work on the HCC programme, we have also actioned one of the core recommendations of the task force, that the development of policies should include engagement across local and central government. So, over the course of the past year, colleagues have undertaken a very useful round of engagement with the executive departments and with each local council. Where the programme does differ from the proposal of the task force is in its structure. Under heritage, culture and creativity, we will be developing separate but appropriately connected policies based on a common framework and covering a wider span of subjects. This approach will give each of the constituent parts the status they merit and provide each of the communities of interest their own focus. I think it's also worth noting that while the work within the HCC programme will be important in collecting evidence and making new arguments for funding for the sectors, the work itself does not cover issues of budget. However, we do know that in relation to the general point around funding levels for these important sectors, the Minister has been crystal clear in his stance, including when he said in the Assembly in January of this year, "I do not believe that the arts get the level of funding that they deserve or require. Funding the arts is an investment in people and our services." The Minister has already demonstrated this support for increased funding by his decisions this year to add £500,000 to the Arts Council's opening resource budget allocation and increased its opening capital allocation by over 50% to £1.4 million. Other HCC policy areas have also seen increased funding in this year's budget, with Libraries NI and the Northern Ireland Museums Council receiving additional allocations of £950,000 and £110,000 respectively. Concerning the Historic Environment, in 25-26, Minister has increased Historic Environment Division's capital budget from £2.8 million in 2024-25 to £6.3 million. This includes £1.6 million for essential conservation works at Carrickfergus Castle, which will directly enable the heritage-led Carrickfergus City Deal Regeneration Project. It includes £2.1 million for a large-scale capital project for Huroney at the War Rooms in Belfast. It includes just over €1 million for investment in Ballahibon, part of the €4.6 million shared island funding to be drawn down by 2028. These projects are examples of how investment in culture can leverage other funding and often act as a catalyst for regeneration and much wider public benefit. Clear policy, strong evidence and real potential are crucial to underpinning the case for the additional funding across culture and heritage in Northern Ireland. The work undertaken through the HCC programme is a crucial contributor to make that case and to support the work of the people and organisations who already make such a contribution in education, health, the economy, and to the quality of life of people here and who have capacity to do even more. Thank you, Chair and members, and we're happy to take any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Emer, for that presentation. And I suppose a couple from me and then I'll go to members. So first of all, the framework itself points out that funding for the sector has been consistently falling and that it will take proper investment to achieve its aims. So how much does the Minister foresee setting aside for the HCC programme?
So that work is currently underway as part of the future budget discussions, and in the back of the CSR, Minister will be making his own prioritised bids as part of that process.
Do you have an estimate?
So at the moment, the priorities, and I'll turn to colleagues, are the policy updates that we are undertaking at the moment. I think a number of the policy areas have been outdated, I think is a quick way of saying very old. We are also then looking at a number of strategic actions that can be taken forward. But Iain,
I think, Emer, in answer to the Chair's question, also actually an awful lot of what the heritage, culture and creativity areas do is driving improved well-being, improved education, improved skills, etc. So actually this is about executive budgets. It's not just, in fact, it is not about departmental budgets in Department for Communities.
So because of the importance of all those issues, that's why I want to know how much the Department for Communities, and we are the Communities Committee, that's why I'm asking how much, given that importance, how much is being invested in that. So I fully get the importance of why this is all fundamentally important. Okay, thank you. So, and you've talked about policy, Emer, which leads me into my second question. So the framework states the first phase will include, and I'm going to quote here from the framework, the review and renewal of policies in respect of public libraries and museums. So that's incredibly vague, I have to say. What does that actually mean? What policies do you intend to review? How are they going to be reviewed? And what tangible changes can we expect coming out of that review?
I'll turn to Iain and then John.
There are, as the committee will be aware, there is a museums policy for Northern Ireland. It was published in 2011. Nelson McCausland wrote the foreword. There is a public libraries policy for Northern Ireland. It's one of my parlour game questions. The foreword was written by Maria Eagle, MP, as Direct War Minister. That's how old that policy is. The internet was hardly a thing when that policy was written. So this is about, as you quoted the words there, sorry Chair, 2R words, it's about renewal of those policies. It is about updating those for 15 years and 25 years on.
But fair to say we're only at the very start of that process, and rather than this framework itself creating change, the change is all still to come. That's all.
Bring John in.
Yes, go ahead, John.
So I think it's maybe useful to put this into a broader context of what culture means and where we sit currently as an executive and prior to the executive in terms of policies relating to culture. We don't have an arts policy, so the wording around the creation of an arts policy is subtly different than it is. We don't have a policy on historic environment, a formal policy, all right? So the wording is different. We do, as Iain says, for those other two sectors. So it's purely the wording to draw the distinction. The purpose of the framework is really, there were two options, broadly speaking. One is to try and do a big all-singing, all-dancing culture policy, which we could have done. Our assessment was to bring all the things that we needed to cover in those. Would probably have taken 5 years and would have been an endless round of debate and discussion in trying to reach compromise. That the construction of the framework allows us actually to pay some respect to in this case, the four sectors and the people who work in them, to give them their own standing. But they're all part of the broader culture piece, along with things like language. And so there are links and connections between them, and hence the framework.
So, Chair, just to give you comfort, they're not all starting from a standing still position with the publication of the framework. So the work has been ongoing in each policy area.
I do get that, Emer, yeah. but I'm keen to see further progress on. But I do get you're not starting from cold. Listen, time is of the essence now, so I'm going to go to our Deputy Chair, Nicola Brogan.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks the four of you for your briefing here. I've just got one quick question that's almost fallen on from our last discussion, and it's about the regional balance piece. And you'll know the committee and even the public don't have great confidence in how the Minister distributes the funds regionally and that. So what can you do to say that this will be safeguarded going forward, that you know that this fund will be distributed fair and equitably right across the north and right across different traditions and that?
I think I would say there isn't going to be a fund. There will not be, having listened to the last briefing, maybe for the better, there will not be a specific fund. There will be a heritage, culture and creativity suite of policies within a programme. We already have significant funding to museums, to libraries, etc., etc. There already includes significant grant programmes through the Arts Council in particular, through HED itself, through Museums Council. We have libraries across Northern Ireland, we have museums across Northern Ireland, we have heritage assets across Northern Ireland, we have arts activity across Northern Ireland. That will all be part of being driven by the policy. So the policy is shaping renewal and further invigoration of those sectors all across the 6 counties. So, but there won't be a fund which will have applications in to allocate underneath this programme.
Sorry, I shouldn't have said fund. I did mean just the programme. And again, it's just to make sure that it is that all the policies even are distributed fairly right across the board. And
just on the point around the principle of that, one of the core principles underpinning all this as we move forward is that appreciation of the role of grassroots and the role of community engagement. And that's got nothing to do with talent, creativity, engagement. That has nothing to do with postcode where you live. But the crucial principle underpinning this is about the equality of opportunity. So the equality of opportunity for participation. So it's supporting the participation of people wherever they are across Northern Ireland to be engaged. And that's one of the core principal underpinnings of that regionalisation. Now, there's a broader piece around how the current budget is spent, and there's reasons and rationale for that, and I know the committee's been interested in that as well. But what we're in a policy piece, we're interested in highlighting, making clear that this policy is about opportunity, not just for the professional sectors and the protection of important monuments and important buildings, but it's about community engagement, and that's why it stretches beyond the Arts Council and all the other councils we have and beyond us into local councils and to the voluntary sector and right into the grassroots community. So that's a crucial underpinning, I think, of the regionalisation and the importance of regionalisation.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Brian?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of historic environment buildings that are in community ownership, or it says in the framework under places, empowering communities to use their historic environment as a resource to meet local needs and maximising the role of councils, community and voluntary groups, volunteer organisations and individuals in the promotion, protection and enjoyment of these heritage assets. What in practice does that mean? What support can you provide for third sector organisation which own historic buildings and are seeking to bring them into modern use and preserve them for the future.
And let Manus take.
Well, I think the first thing is to say that this is a policy aim and an aspiration. So I think it's good to see that we have this in the policy, that this is something that we want to do. We have increasingly over recent years looked towards working with communities, to work with them to realise the potential of our historic environment. We have funded the Architectural Heritage Fund from 2017 to provide viability grants and development grants to communities to take on heritage at risk. We've worked with DERA to develop the Village Catalyst grant scheme, which is utilising DERA TRIPSI money and communities within villages, and it's had very impressive results in terms of not just regeneration of buildings, but also community empowerment and community confidence building, and actually investment in some of the villages that we have invested in. So I think really what we are seeing is that there is potential there to work with communities. We all appreciate we live in very difficult and constrained times in terms of budgets, and I think there's a real opportunity there to deepen and expand that, and we're looking at various ways we could do that.
Okay, so you're willing to provide advice, support, and to engage with groups,
yes,
and see where that leads to.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. And if Chair, if it's not too, I know it's another department, but in terms of the dilapidation bill, and its relevance to older buildings which are in derelict condition and at risk of being lost, have you had input into that bill in a cross-departmental manner, and what difference do you think it could potentially make?
Well, yes, and it's to say that the genesis of that bill was the 2011 Heritage Crime Summit, where the Minister
What was that again? Sorry,
the 2011 Heritage Crime Summit, where the Minister of the Environment brought parties together to look at how we could tackle the issues that were being faced at that time. One of the things that emerged from that discussion was that the dilapidation legislation as it currently exists dates from the Victorian period and needs to be updated. A key issue for heritage is that the current legislation says that if you're issuing a dilapidation notice, the dilapidation notice must say you must make good or take down or demolish. And so there's no way you can split between that, and that has been used as an excuse on a number of occasions to demolish listed buildings without listed building consent. And so the new legislation makes clear that the dilapidation legislation can be split in two. You can say to somebody you must make good. You don't have to say that they have to demolish. And the other thing is it says very clearly that this notice should not take precedence over other consents that are required. So if you want to knock down a listed building, you need listed building consent. So we're positive in terms of the dilapidation bill and how it's set out and proposed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sian, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all very much for coming to committee. It's great to finally get to see you all in the flesh again. One of the questions that I kept coming back to when I was looking at this is just, I think I've talked quite a lot about the investing in creative delivery. That was a timepiece in terms of consultation with the sector. And Emer had said there that since it's building on the task force and you've listened to voices from the sector, what's the feedback been so far since the framework was published?
That report, the Culture, Arts and Heritage Task Force report, I was involved in, Manus was involved in, and possibly Emer as well, but we were involved in the development of that as part of Rotha's team. When we say that this builds on the foundation of this work, we're serious. We mean it. The consultation that was undertaken in that exercise was really wide and really extensive. And when you look at the framework document, we talk about emerging issues and emerging actions, right, in 5 ways, and that's around capital and research and other things. Those have their genesis largely in that report and the work of the Culture, Arts and Heritage Task Force. So it is a genuine point. What we didn't want to do, and what our feedback from the sector was, that they didn't want another round of that extensive engagement. The feedback we've had in terms of the framework we've put in has been broadly positive, in the sense that people are recognising that we are genuine in listening to the concerns of the 4 sectors involved in this, that we have picked up things that professionals and the experts out there doing the work have known for quite some time, and we're reflecting it in the work that's coming forward. So the reaction actually has been fairly positive, and including we were in with Derry Council, Derry and Strabane Council last week, and that sort of feedback was given back to us as well. That this has been, we've listened carefully, and we're reflecting what people out there already know, and the priorities that they would have set. So it's been positive.
I think it is important to acknowledge, and the Chair, you raised it as well in your opening remarks, that we do need action as well on the back of the work that we've done. So the framework is there now to allow that action to be taken forward. And it doesn't mean that we're not doing other things as well around the piece. And I think creative delivery in particular, and the work that we're doing with NI Screen and the creative industries and the wider piece will all be ongoing too, Shan, while we work on the policy development.
What is the timeline then for those policies at the moment?
So you will have seen advance notice of the policy aims for each of the 4 policies in that framework document. That was setting the scene for public consultations that, subject to the minister's approval, we will be kicking off in the course of the autumn. So there'll be 4 of them. They'll be staggered to give everybody with an interest the opportunity to engage in that. They'll take 3 months. So that puts us towards the end of the year. We'll take some time. We'll consider the feedback, the responses we get, and we'll develop the shape of a formal, final policy that we expect, subject again to ministerial approval, to start publishing in the course of the spring, as early as we can in the process. And with those 4 policies, Emer makes the point around actions. We will publish at the same time as the last of those policies, just to capture everything. The sorts of actions that are coming out of the policy structure, that'll be the process where we'll get an action plan. You'll start seeing those in springtime, but we're talking about it now, and the work on the cross-programme pieces is already starting because they're so clear. But there'll be other agencies and organisations who will have a role to play in the delivery of the policy aims across the piece. It's not just for the department or even just for our arm's length bodies.
Are there concerns that if this is published by spring of next year, it won't be in time for a multi-year budget setting process, so therefore won't actually be ingrained in you're developing a policy, but actually the budget won't marry in terms of those policies and the timelines?
Well, the work of design and thought in terms of planning for the budget will go on in tandem, as Emer says. Nothing's stopped. I mean, we have put in, or we're working on initial thoughts about what the cost might look like going forward. But these are 10-year policies, remember? So there'll be some things that maybe don't get picked up immediately in the first years of a budget that are longer term. But we're already looking to try and get a reasonable assessment of how much extra it might take. And there are already assessments of
so some of the feedback, and I want to make it clear that I want to channel some of the feedback that I get from the sector, and it is that whilst they know the department has listened, they do feel that there has been a lot of wasted time, a massive amount of wasted time. You have, in terms of the consultation that happened, very extensive consultation that happened, as you've outlined, 2 years and 3 months since that document was done. Then we had the announcement of this, and we're only just getting to it a year later. There is frustrations there within the sector, and I think that when we then look at the prioritised budgets and those policy updates then taking longer, there is a frustration there in the sector. I just want to come on a wee bit around the governments and the cross-departmental input.
If you can, please, Sharon.
Yeah, I will try, but this is important, I think, to eke out, Chair, if that's okay. It's just around, I mean, that there's a lack of formal whole of government input there in terms of the targets or the focuses from the framework. When we look at that, how is that going to be reflected in budgets of other departments or priorities of other departments, that cross-departmental working group? that was set up, has that had an input into the framework? And in those timelines, do they marry up? Because at the minute there doesn't seem to be a huge link up, for example, with the economy department around creative skills. It's mentioned, but there's no tangible outcomes or structures that we can see within this framework. Maybe I'm reading it wrong.
I think John and his team have engaged extensively with each department bilaterally and with each of the 11 district councils bilaterally. There have been very strong common themes, but inevitably been some specific things with each. You mentioned creative skills, for instance, and just to build on John's point that this hasn't all been waiting, we are nearing the end of a £4 million government investment in the Creative Industries New Entrants Scheme, for instance, that was a COVID response. And that is being rolled by NI Screen onwards into their corporate planning, their corporate plan piece. So there is an awful lot of stuff happening already. It may not be badged as HCC policy, but it is building and informing and being informed by all of the policy development. As we now work with the other departments, we are saying, well, what does that mean for you? John and his team met with the mental health champion 3 weeks ago to look specifically at mental health for these sectors. I recognise as chair of the all-party group on arts, you're thinking particularly of arts, but there is a wide breadth across all of these that interplay and build and work with each other as well. So there are a range of engagements going on. That one, I think, by chance came by her saying, hang on a minute, can I find out more about this? Sometimes we are going to people, they are now starting to come to us, which is positive as well.
Okay. One last wee question is just around the joint statement by the Taoiseach and the Prime Minister around that support development and delivery of the Shared Island Cultural Cooperation Fund, €20 million for shared cooperation between the arts. There is a mention within the document there about that looking for other funding streams. Philanthropy is great, but not sustainable always for the arts sector. But I'm just wondering, when I asked the question of had the department had any engagement with the Irish government around that shared island, I was told to go to the Irish government, but have conversations been had around the funding, that €10 million that we hope is going to be delivered in some way into the Northern Irish economy of arts?
I think that's a little unfair on the Minister by saying go and talk to the Irish government. The Minister said funding decisions from the Shared Island programme are a matter for the Irish government. He didn't say, I don't think he said with respect, go and talk to the Irish government. That 20 million programme, if I'm honest, will largely be eaten up with some very specific programmes. A joint programme between the two arts councils acting jointly on an amount of international activity for what the Irish government call the national cultural institutions will take up a very significant part of that money. I don't think that is going to be the Shared Island vehicle that is going to deliver all of the artistic and HCC ambitions. There will be many others. That isn't the one that I'm overly concerned about, to be honest. I think there will be other things coming along.
Chair, if I can, just to address the first 2 points. In that issue of delay between publication of the task force report, one of the recommendations of the task force report that we should undertake a comprehensive engagement, which they weren't able to do, with all district councils and all government departments. So there was always going to be a delay. Now, that took some time to do, and you'll recall the structural issues perhaps around that. So I acknowledge the point that it's taken some time, but actually we were obliged by the task force itself to take some steps. I think we didn't want to talk for the Irish government about how they spend their money, but we have good relationships with colleagues as we do in Scotland, Wales and England. But we didn't want to go on paper saying, here's how they're going to, so that explains the impact to you.
Has engagement been happening around that shared island? Yes. Is that ongoing?
It's one of the subjects we talk about, yeah. There's lots of things we have in common, across the island in terms of, the arts is an all-island, and in many respects the arts is an all-Ireland business. So there are lots of things we have in common, and so we have a good relationship with colleagues in Dublin and talk about things.
I can come in that, so the clue's a bit in the title, the Shared Island Fund, so I'm surprised to hear you saying that that's up to the Irish government. My understanding of this process is that a project will only come forward when departments on both sides of the island come together on a project. So I don't understand why that would necessarily be being led by the Irish government just because they're funding.
The final decision maker is the Office of the Taoiseach, and you are right, there is engagement before that stage, but there is no decision making role for the Northern Ireland Executive. It is with the Office of Taoiseach as to where the money finally goes.
But in that
There's an input
specific
role.
scheme, there will be 3 strands. One will be a joint programme between the 2 arts councils. One will be for the national cultural bodies working with each other, and they will have to show that they are working with at least one from each side of the border. So there are procedures within that particular three-stranded piece of funding for that dialogue to happen. It is happening predominantly in arm's length bodies, not in the department itself. Although, as John said, I was on a call with them about Irish colleagues about this as recently as last week, for instance. So there is ongoing dialogue.
Okay. So a couple of quick ones I want to just check with before we move on. Well, creativity now, until Sean raised creativity, an awful lot of discussion prior to that was heritage and culture. Those get mentioned often. We have a fantastically talented, huge potential, but woefully under-supported creative arts sector. Now, I'm glad we have had a good discussion about it there. The committee did a significant roundtable event here in the Long Gallery and have provided the department with that report. Can I ask how that report has factored into your programme, and also what support is going to be brought forward for individual artists, which was a key issue emerging from that?
Again, can we just go back to the structure of the programme that we've developed? The HCC programme exists to help us make policies. The policies describe what ministers want to see happen. After that comes the stage of action and strategy, where the department and other agencies and individuals will start, and that's the point where you'll start seeing specific programmes. What we can say in the documentation prior to that is the direction of travel. And if you look at the policy aims, I think we've picked up on the policy aims. I was at that meeting in the Long Gallery. It was at points pretty uncomfortable as an official, but really, really useful, as all those engagements are. So it all goes into strengthening our understanding of the position of the experts in the field, and the positions of the experts in the field tend to be the practitioners. So it is taken on board, and you may not see it, obviously, but I can tell you in drafting.
Well, we'll want to see it.
And I'll be happy when we get to that point. I'll be happy to talk you right through it.
Okay. Thank you. Final one for me then. And the Deputy Chair has touched upon the crucial importance of ensuring that there is regional balance, and also that there's balance in terms of cultural and reflecting all of the cultural diversity that we have. Emer, you mentioned 2 projects there at the outset. You mentioned, I think, the War Rooms and Blahi Bawn only. So how are recent investment priorities being identified?
Those are examples, Chair. We can provide further detail.
I'd like to see that. I would like to see that, Emer, just to get the full scale of that.
Yes. And Carrickfergus Castle.
Pardon?
Carrickfergus Castle as well, Chair.
Carrickfergus Castle doesn't. I'd like to see more, to be quite frank. In all sorts of balance, that's a little bit challenging. But anyway, I want to thank you, and Emer, it's clear that you have a huge amount of responsibility within the department, and I certainly hope that the important work that you're engaged in across a range of strands, including ones we haven't even touched on today, are being adequately resourced within the department, because they're hugely important work. But I do understand that. I want to thank you and your team for providing this briefing and responding to members' questions, and we will see you again, with no doubt, in due course. All the best, Emer. Thank you.
See you next week at the all-party group.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, members, thank you. Just check, touch base with you, members. Is there anything you want to pick up on coming out of the session? Or members, go ahead, Kelly.
We maybe just, I know it's an Alliance Minister, can we go and ask just questions about the dilapidation bill when it comes to historic buildings that are listed but they're non-dwellings? I'm not sure if that's covered under the dilapidation bill, just to see if they are within that scope. Because there are historical monuments, buildings. I have a key in my area that's a disgrace, and I don't think that they would be covered. But it's just if we can ask for clarification from Deera.
From Deera, so historic buildings which are listed but not dwellings, and whether the dilapidation bill
would cover those as premises. Because I was trying to find here the definition of premises on that, and it doesn't seem to correlate. Yeah.
Okay, yep, members content with that? Okay, thank you. We'll move hastily along then, members, to our final briefing today, please. And Thank you for your cooperation. Agenda item 12 then is departmental briefing on the Charity Commission scheme of delegation. Papers for the agenda item are at page 794, and I'd now like to welcome to our meeting Colleen Bell, and Colleen is head of Charities Policy and Legislation Team, and Martin Ireland, who's Deputy Principal, Charities Policy and Legislation Team. So Colleen, could I invite you to make, please, a brief opening statement, and then we'll get to members' questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to brief you on this important development in charity regulation in Northern Ireland. My name is Colleen Bell, and I'm head of the Charities Policy and Legislation Team, and I'm accompanied today by my colleague Martin Ireland, who together with me worked on the Charities Act Northern Ireland 2022, which provided the power for the Department to make the scheme of delegation for the Charity Commission for Northern Ireland. So this morning I hope to briefly remind members of the background to and the reasons for introducing the scheme, to give you an overview of the main findings of the public consultation on the scheme required by the 2022 Act, and to explain at a high level what it does. Martin and I will then be happy to take any questions that you might have. So members will be aware of the McBride High Court judgment of May 2019 and the subsequent Court of Appeal judgment of 2020, which found that the Charity Commission for Northern Ireland did not have the power to delegate its functions to staff acting alone. These judgments caused great uncertainty within the charity sector. All previous statutory decisions of the Commission had been taken by trained staff members of the Commission rather than the Commission itself, due to a misinterpretation in the legislation. Following the McBride judgment, the Commission adopted a decision-making committee system to take all statutory decisions. This came at a cost and slowed down decision-making process for charities. The Minister at the time brought forward a bill which became the Charities Act Northern Ireland 2022 and commissioned an independent review of charity regulation in Northern Ireland. The review considered the regulatory framework and the role of the Commission within it. The 2022 Act made those decisions taken by staff lawful, where to do so did not impinge on the rights under the European Convention on Human Rights, and it also provided that some future decisions could be taken by staff if set out in a scheme of delegation made by the Department after public consultation. The Act stipulated that certain decisions, which had led to the majority of tribunal cases, such as those concerning the opening of statutory inquiries and the powers of the Commission to remove or suspend trustees, for example, could never be delegated to staff acting alone. During the passage of the Act, the independent review reported making 93 recommendations to improve charity regulation. One of those recommendations was that the Department should introduce a scheme of delegation for the Commission. The Department ran a public consultation from March to June 2023 as required by the Act. This was preceded in May and June 2022 by a series of targeted pre-consultation meetings with a number of stakeholders, such as sectoral representative groups or those that had shown an interest in the subject during the independent review. Most, though not all, were in favour of a scheme, as it was expected to speed up decision-making within the Commission. Those against largely had a previous negative experience pertaining to statutory decisions. There were 28 responses to the public consultation. 57% of responses were in favour of a scheme and 43% were opposed. There was a clear split throughout the responses, with those who agreed with the introduction of a scheme agreeing with the majority of the proposals presented in the draft. Those who were against a scheme disagreed with most of the Department's proposals. All those who responded on behalf of representative bodies and organisations were in favour of the introduction of a scheme, indicating support across the sector. Those in favour expressed the view that a scheme of delegation would speed up processes for charities and bring the Commission's approach into line with other charity regulators, albeit with the protections provided for higher risk decisions in the 2022 Act. Those who were not in favour in most cases cited the need for more time for the cultural changes recommended by the independent review to take their effect, and their belief that poor decisions have been taken by staff of the Commission in the past. They also rejected any argument that the workload for commissioners in carrying out all decision-making functions of the Commission was excessive and that the committee system was operating effectively. Officials analysed all the responses, drafted a departmental response to it, which was subsequently published, and recommended that Minister introduce the scheme with the minor amendments made as a result of the consultation and with engagement with the Office of the Attorney-General. The Department recognises that some respondents held very strong views that there should not be a scheme, but felt that there were mitigations in place to address their concerns, and that it was in the wider public interest that the scheme should be introduced in order that the Commission could provide a more effective and efficient service to charities. The introduction of the committee system for all decisions, whilst necessary to ensure legality, has proven to be an inefficient way to take decisions, increasing the length of time for a decision to be reached and communicated to charities, and adding additional cost to each decision taken. Whilst there will be a continuing need for those decision-making committees in order to comply with the requirement for some decisions to be taken by commissioners, the number of committees required should be significantly reduced, resulting in some cost savings. In terms of financial savings as a result of the scheme, any efficiency savings can be reinvested within the Commission to other priority areas of work. It will also mean that Commissioner time can be used more strategically, as recommended by the independent review. Cost efficiencies, however, were not the main driver for introducing a scheme. It is estimated that waiting times for charities as a result of the committee system could be reduced by a third, up to approximately 5 weeks in some cases, due to the removal of the additional layers of scrutiny for even the most routine and low-risk decisions. The Department found no evidence to suggest that staff, including senior management, are not capable of taking the decisions delegated to them, as they are subject matter experts who have and will continue to avail of appropriate training. Previous appeals to the Charity Tribunal did not evidence poor decision making by staff. The vast majority of those contentious decisions that were appealed related to decisions arising from statutory inquiries, which will always be taken by commissioners or a committee in accordance with the 2022 Act. As members may know, there is currently a judicial review in respect to the decision to introduce a scheme, so I can't really say too much more in that regard. Turning to the scheme itself, departmental officials worked with the Commission staff to identify the statutory decisions required for the Commission within the 2022 Act. We then drafted a proposed scheme and outlined at a high level how it might work at the pre-consultation events. As part of the consultation process, officials briefed the Commission on the content of the prospective scheme and how it might work in practice. The draft was put out to consultation as required by the Act, and minor amendments were made following that consultation and engagement with the Office of the Attorney General. The final scheme was approved by Minister Lyons on the 13th of February 2025. The key elements of the scheme are decision making across 3 tiers. The first tier is the Commission itself or a committee established for that purpose. The second tier is the Commission's senior management team, and the third tier is the Commission staff, who may seek support from the Commission's in-house legal team. The Commission makes provision for ad hoc and formal reviews to amend it if required. It has also been future-proofed by including decisions required in sections of the 2008 Act which have not yet been commenced, and it contains clear signposting of appeal and review rights for all decisions. So, Chair, to sum up, the Department believes that it has responded to the needs of the charity sector by introducing a scheme which should improve the service the Commission provides to charities. This is evidenced in part by the recommendation of the independent review that one should be introduced. Freeing up of Commissioners' time will enhance their capacity to address matters of a strategic nature and should, for instance, assist them in their endeavour to make the Commission the enabling regulator envisaged by the independent review. This process has already begun, with the Commission changing its approach to better meet the needs of charities, with a focus on enhancing their engagement with stakeholders. Staff resources required to brief Commissioners on all decisions can now be redirected to other areas. Whilst it is too early to say how impactful the delegation of some decisions to staff has been, initial data provided by the Commission is positive. Although direct comparisons are difficult due to factors such as staff availability over the summer months and the fact that some decisions are more complex than others, the Commission estimates that almost 20% more registration and casework decisions have been taken over a corresponding number of months prior to the scheme's introduction. The Department took care to ensure that there are mitigations in terms of the types of decision and to what level, if any, they are delegated. The scheme respects the Court of Appeal's obiter comments. There is no blanket delegation as there is in other jurisdictions. The Department will regularly review the operation of the scheme to ensure it remains fit for purpose. Thank you, Chair and members. And Martin and I are happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Colleen. Just one from me briefly, and I'll get to members then and see where we're going on time. But what key issues, and you've touched, I think, on 1 or 2 there, but what key issues would you like to see addressed through the upcoming Charities Bill?
So the upcoming Charities Bill is actually to address the 19 recommendations from the independent review that require primary legislation. So there's a number of factors. Some of them is reducing accounting, so easements and accounting requirements for charities. There's also some clarification of just some parts of the Act. What else off the top of my head?
There may be amendments to Section 167. We're currently consulting on that at the minute, as the independent review found that in its current form it's inoperable. So we carried out our first stakeholder event this week. There's another one planned for next week, and there's an online consultation out at the moment.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to go to Kelly then. Go ahead, Kelly, please.
Thank you. I'm delighted to hear that the 167s are being dealt with, because I used to work for one of them. You couldn't apply for money in Northern Ireland even though you were operating here. But the scheme of delegation, can I just clarify, moving forward we have the changes to the minimum thresholds. Will the scheme of delegation allow the Charity Commission to speed up that process, you know, to recognise those that are applying to, that they're under the minimum threshold. Will that help with that process?
The registration threshold that
Yeah.
you're referring to. So that's a registration decision, so that would be a decision taken by staff in the scheme of delegation. So
That will help, because I know I was speaking to Francis actually. The IT system and that's going to take a while to kick in, so I would rather that the decisions could be made, and you know that the IT system will take a while to come in, but as long as the staff have the powers to confirm that application, that would be really helpful, because
we obviously still need to make the regulations for the we should be in front of you probably in the next few weeks for that. So.
I have to say the initial delays on registration, it was because everybody was registering at the same time and there was thousands being put through, and worked on so many of them. So I'm not really expecting a huge amount of, well, there will be a large amount of charities that come under the minimum threshold. It won't be as much as it was when everybody moved over to the Northern Ireland Charity Commission, but yeah, it's just if we can make work a bit cleaner and easier for the staff, so that they do have those powers, I think that's something that we would support. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly. Brian?
Okay. I'm hoping this is not a big question to ask. Some years ago there was limitations on charities registering in Northern Ireland. They're different to in GB. Are those matters resolved now? For a while groups couldn't get charitable status. I don't know if you recall that.
I don't.
Has that been rectified by the 2022 Act? I don't know.
The 2022 Act didn't address registration at all. Registration is a matter for the Charity Commission. They're the statutory regulator. They assess a charity's governing documents against the requirements of the 2008 Act. Now, our Act is based largely on the position in England and Wales. So I'm not aware of any particular issues, but if you want to provide them to us, we'll seek clarification from the Commission.
I know it's not the subject of your paper, but I know that there were issues some years ago with groups applying for charitable status, but it might have been resolved. So.
Is it the public benefit test?
Oh, if we're talking right back, there was, when the 2008 Act was drafted, there was a problem with the public benefit test, and that resulted in the 2013 Act, which amended that public benefit test. So there was a delay in the registration process starting. Even though the Act was made in 2008, registration actually didn't start until 2013, after that amendment was made to fix that issue with the public benefit test. So if that's what you're referring to, then yes, that issue was addressed.
Some years ago, just I remember there was a backlog and groups couldn't get charitable status. Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, listen, we look forward to seeing you back and seeing for the working on. It's obviously a very, very crucial area, and we're all very deeply appreciative of everything that charities out there do, and keen to see as much support and progress and all of that in this important field of work. So thank you both for attending today. Thank you. Okay, members, anyone wants to pick up following on from that session, or members content? Was that? Yep. Okay, thank you, members. Moving on then to item 13 on our agenda, forward work programme, a copy of which is at page 799. Do members have any comments, or are they content to note the forward work programme? Content, thank you, members. Members, we heard on Tuesday about an LCM which may be tabled in the coming weeks. Are you content that the committee team proceed to schedule in work which will help the committee to scrutinise the LCM in line with the 15 days provided for in Standing Order 42A bracket 7? Members content? Yes. Thank you for that. Agenda item 14, any other business? Do members have any other business they wish to raise? Kelly?
Chair, if I could I ask that we get some legal advice as a committee? Earlier we had the presentation where officials indicated that committees could apply for information through Freedom of Information. Can I have clarification, legal clarification of what committees can and cannot ask for? I just think that the role of a scrutiny committee is not really being understood, that we're not being trusted with information. It's almost, I got the feeling that any information that would be provided would be out in the public domain. If they give it to us in confidence, it's in confidence. But I would like a legal opinion on that if possible, just so we can clarify are we out of order in asking questions for reports and things like that created by officials? I don't believe that it all includes legal advice, which I absolutely respect will not be made public and probably wouldn't be made available to us at any time. But reports and other things, I think, should be available for committees in order to enable us to do scrutiny.
Yeah, I agree. Your members agreed?
Agreed, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Any other business members? Therefore, I'm going on to agenda item 15. Date, time and location of the next meeting. Just before I mention that, I just want to also, I know we mentioned in relation to the sign language bill, but I want to thank the committee staff for the amount of work that's gone into this meeting alone. As always, and I think the size and the scale of the packs indicate the scale of the work that goes into all of these meetings. So in a more general sense, I do want to put that on the record on behalf of committee members as well. Our thanks to the entire team for preparing us for that. So members, our next meeting will be at 10 a.m. on Thursday, 25th of September 2025 in the Shannon Chamber, and the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, members.
Committee Room 29, Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, Sound.